Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking into a pretty substantial set of court documents from the Richard Allen case.
Yeah, a big stack.
Our plan is basically to walk through these, pull out the key moments, the twists and turns,
Yeah.
give you a clearer picture of this whole complex legal situation without you having to read hundreds of pages.
Exactly. We've got records covering mostly late 2022 through to October 2023. It gives a really detailed look, though maybe not always perfectly chronological, into how things unfolded legally.
So where do we start?
Well, the logical place is the record of proceedings. It's like a court diary, logging all the filings. And right away, you see Richard Allen requesting a public defender back in November 2022.
Okay, so that's the very beginning of his formal involvement with the court system here.
Right, and the court appoints counsel pretty quickly. Then you see co-counsel appearing, the initial defense lawyer getting involved. The wheels start turning fast.
But then, almost immediately, there's a sort of hiccup. I see a pretrial conference was canceled, one scheduled for January 2023.
Yeah, that's right. And while canceling a conference can happen for lots of reasons, sometimes, it hints at maybe some early disagreements or complexities bubbling up already.
Interesting. So it wasn't all smooth sailing from day one.
Not entirely. They reschedule a hearing for February 23. But maybe more significantly, around this time, the state files something called a verified request to prohibit public access to a court record.
So trying to keep certain things under wraps.
Seems like it. And the defendant fires back with a petition to let to. Unfortunately, the title's cut off right there in the document we have.
Let to. Any guesses what that might have been?
Hard to say for sure. Could be let to introduce evidence or maybe let to access something specific. It definitely signals an early fight over transparency, what gets seen and what doesn't.
So right off the bat, we're seeing this tug of war over information. That seems like a theme that's going to continue.
Oh, absolutely. It really ramps up near the end of November 2022, November 29th specifically. The state files a redacted probable cause affidavit.
Redacted, okay. So parts are blacked out.
Correct. And on the same day, the court issues an order. This order deals with the state's request to limit public comments and the defendant's motion for a change of venue.
Wow. Okay, a lot happening there. Change of venue suggests concerns about getting a fair trial locally.
That's usually the reason, yes. And that order, signed December 1st, sets a hearing date for January 13th, 2023. Plus, there's a transport order entered December 1st, too.
So a flurry of activity, controlling information, venue changes, moving the defendant. It really highlights that early strategic maneuvering.
Exactly. It's not just about the evidence itself, but how and where the case will be presented and who knows what. It's a battle for control.
And the defense isn't just reacting, right? They're making moves too.
Definitely. By December 30th, 2022, they file a supplemental motion for discovery, asking for more evidence, basically. And they also request Rule 404 and 405 evidence.
Rule 404 and 405. Remind me, what kind of evidence is that?
That's generally about prior acts or character evidence. So it suggests the defense might be anticipating the prosecution trying to introduce things from Allen's past, maybe.
Okay, trying to get ahead of that.
And they also filed an ex parte motion and order authorizing funding for fact investigator.
Ex parte meaning?
Just for the judge's eyes, initially. Without the prosecution necessarily involved in that specific request for funding. They needed resources to conduct their own investigation.
Got it. So they're building their own case, looking for funds, and anticipating the prosecution's moves, all scheduled for that same January 13th hearing date. Busy day.
Very busy. Then, things shift a bit as we get into 2023. April 5th, the defense files an emergency motion to modify safekeeping order.
Emergency motion, safekeeping order. That sounds like it relates to his detention.
That's exactly what it suggests. Serious concerns about the conditions where he was being held. Safekeeping orders relate to how and where a defendant is detained, often for safety reasons, but this motion implies they wanted those conditions changed urgently.
And the state keeps filing requests to prohibit public access around the same time. April 2023.
Yes, more verified requests to prohibit public access, plus motions about subpoenas. So that fight over information is definitely ongoing. Who gets access to what records, including third-party records, potentially?
And I see a note here about a Westville correctional inmate letter being filed May 3rd. Westville. That's a high security place, right?
Yes, maximum security. The fact a letter from an inmate there becomes part of the court record is, well, it's unusual. Could be related to those confinement condition concerns the defense raised.
It adds another layer. Then also in May 2023, it looks like the defense really goes on the offensive.
Yeah, a whole slew of filings. Motion to quash subpoena, trying to block an evidence request, another verified request to prohibit public access, then a motion to reconsider and request for due process hearing, and even a verified motion for temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction.
Whoa, okay, that's a lot. What's the temporary restraining order about, typically?
They're asking the court to immediately stop something from happening. Maybe stop the state from accessing certain records or prevent some action related to the investigation while the court considers their arguments more fully. It's a significant pushback.
Definitely sounds like it. Now, amidst all this legal fighting, there are practical things happening too, right? Like managing the courtroom itself.
Absolutely. There's a notice of hearing that lays out really specific rules for the public and media, things like maintaining order, where people can sit, limited capacity, the nuts and bolts of handling a high-profile case.
Makes sense. And importantly, they actually set jury trial dates, January 8th and 9th, 2024. Gives everyone a target, even if it might change later.
Exactly. It provides a structure, a timeline for preparation, even if tentative, and these notices about courtroom conduct really underscore the intense public interest.
The legal wrangling continues into the summer, June 2023. Defense needs money for an expert witness.
Right, an ex parte motion for order authorizing expert at a public expense, common in public defender cases needing specialized analysis.
And the Indiana Department of Correction jumps in. Motion to quash a subpoena or get a protective order.
Yeah, suggests the defense was trying to get records from the DOC, maybe related to Allen's time in Westville, or perhaps something else entirely, and the DOC was pushing back.
And the state's still trying to get third-party records in September. It's just this constant battle over information, isn't it?
It really is. Access to evidence, expert resources, it's fundamental to building either side's case.
Okay, but then July 2023 seems like a big moment for transparency, potentially. An order issued about all the sealed documents.
Yes, this was significant. The court, after talking with both sides, decided to unseal most of the previous filings. They cited public interest, transparency.
Most, but not all.
Right. Key things remain sealed. The original probable cause affidavit, for instance, probably to protect investigation details. Transport orders for security. And those defense ex parte motions for funding, likely protected by rules around defense strategy. But it did clarify the scope of that gag order from December 2022.
So for the public, this meant suddenly getting a much broader view of the arguments and motions that had been filed up to that point.
Precisely. A potential turning point in public understanding, even with those key exceptions remaining sealed.
Then heading into the fall, October 2023, more logistical stuff. Detailed instructions for media and public conduct, not just in Carroll County, but also Allen County, maybe for a specific hearing.
Yeah, it highlights the intense scrutiny. Managing crowds, media access, ensuring security across different locations becomes a major operational thing for the court.
But then, October 19th, this looks serious. The defense files a memorandum regarding possible disqualification or sanctions.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Filing something like that suggests a major breakdown or a serious accusation about how the case is being handled. Could be aimed at opposing counsel, maybe even related to the court itself. It signals deep conflict.
And it coincides with a hearing scheduled for Halloween, October 31st, and another transport order. Things seem to be heating up.
Definitely escalating. And around the same time, the defense files a verified notice of continuing representation.
Which sounds like, what? Just stating the obvious? Or is there more to it?
Well, given the context of that memo about disqualification or sanctions, filing this notice feels like a very deliberate statement. Like they're saying, despite whatever issues are being raised, we are still representing Richard Allen and we intend to continue.
Okay. Planting their flag firmly.
You could see it that way.
And this leads us to probably the most explosive filing we've seen so far. The verified motion for immediate transfer of custody. But it comes with something called a Frank's notice and a very long, detailed supporting memorandum.
Yes, this is huge. A Frank's notice specifically challenges the truthfulness of the affidavit used to get a search warrant, and pairing it with a motion to immediately move Allen, backed by this detailed memo, it's a massive challenge on multiple fronts.
Let's dig into that memorandum. It starts with his confinement conditions at Westville, right?
It does, and the language is stark. They call his incarceration inhumane, akin to those of a prisoner of war.
Really strong language. What specifics do they mention?
They talk about very limited family contact, only through electronic tablets, apparently, monitored phone calls, which he had to pay for, and they claim his mental state and ability to communicate had noticeably declined.
Wow. and their legal argument based on that.
That his pretrial detention wasn't just holding him, it was effectively punishing him before any conviction. They argue it violates his Sixth Amendment rights, especially his right to effectively assist in his own defense, which is hard to do, they say, when you're isolated, maybe deteriorating mentally, and facing, quote, overwhelming discovery, thousands of pages, hours of surveillance.
That paints a really grim picture. It's a stark reminder of what pretrial detention can mean, regardless of guilt or innocence later.
It really is. They're arguing the conditions themselves impede a fair trial.
But the memo doesn't stop there. It dives headfirst into alternative suspects, doesn't it? Specifically focusing on individuals allegedly linked to Odinism.
Yes, a significant portion shifts focus dramatically. They argue law enforcement, particularly Sheriff Liggett, dismissed evidence pointing towards others too quickly. And yeah, the focus is squarely on people they claim have ties to Odinism, which they describe as a pagan group with reported white supremacist elements.
And the first name that comes up is Brad Holder, ex-boyfriend of one of the victim's family members.
Right, and the defense lays out a lot of points about him. Social media posts allegedly showing affiliation with something called Vinlanders, described as an Odinist group, and, well, disturbing images.
What else?
They point to sticks arranged like runes found at the crime scene, and they claim Holder posted a picture of his own hand marked with a similar rune shortly after the murders, before those crime scene details were public. That's a potentially significant timing issue they're raising.
Definitely. What about the sheriff's involvement here?
The defense accuses Sheriff Liggett of failing to tell the judge, in his search warrant affidavit for Allen's property, that Allen himself had no connection to Odinism, while these alleged connections existed for others.
And there's witness testimony mentioned.
Yes, sworn testimony from Amber Holder, Brad's ex-wife. She apparently stated that Brad Holder told her that Patrick Westfall and his people did it and made threats.
So, directly implicating others, according to this testimony.
That's what the defense memo claims. They're clearly trying to build a picture of law enforcement ignoring leads pointing away from Allen.
What about this Facebook image mentioned? Found by a tipster.
Yeah, Ryan Boucher reportedly found an image documented by a trooper. The defense claims it mimicked the crime scene sticks on figures looking like runes. And crucially, they allege law enforcement didn't initially turn this image over to them.
That would be a discovery violation, if true.
Potentially, yes. They also mentioned tips coming in right after the murders pointing to Holder and Odinism, which they claim Liggett didn't follow up on adequately, even marking one as no leads required.
No leads required.
Oh, and there's even mention of a supposed 2016 video from Holder's Facebook. Allegedly shows a pagan ritual, someone looking like Patrick Westfall painting a tree, similar to a blood-painted rune found at the actual crime scene.
Wow. So the defense is really compiling a list of specific alternative leads they feel were ignored.
Very much so. They're aiming to cast serious doubt on the investigation's focus and thoroughness. They even question the official explanation for dismissing the Odinist angle, mentioning a mystery Purdue professor whose name officials apparently couldn't recall.
Okay, so Holder is one focus. Who else does the memo bring up?
Elvis Fields lived far away, over 100 miles. But the defense claims he confessed involvement to his sisters.
A confession. That's significant.
If true, absolutely. They also claim he asked a trooper an odd question. If his spit, his DNA, was found on one of the victims.
It is specific and unusual. Any connection back to Holder?
The defense suggests a link through someone named Johnny Messer, both supposedly tied to Vinlanders. They also claim Fields initially lied to police about knowing Messer.
Okay, so trying to establish a network.
And they point to Fields' Facebook activity, saying he was, like, mimicking Brad Holder's posts. Plus, they challenge his alibi for the day of the murders, a supposed hospital trip contradicted, they say, by his phone records.
So questions about his whereabouts and statements, too.
Exactly, raising flags about his credibility and potential involvement.
And Patrick Westfall gets mentioned again.
Yes, friend of Holder, also allegedly linked to Vinlanders. The defense notes his proximity to the crime scene, repeats Amber Holder's claim implicating him, and argues his alibi wasn't thoroughly checked by police, and that alleged video of him marking a tree ties back in.
So another person they feel should have been looked at more closely.
That's the argument. They also briefly mention Rod Abrams, linked to Elvis Fields, who allegedly provided a false alibi for Fields that didn't match phone records. It's like they're mapping out this whole other potential group of suspects.
This all builds towards their core accusation against Sheriff Liggett regarding the search warrant, doesn't it? The Frank's notice part.
Precisely. They flat out accuse Liggett of intentionally or at least recklessly concealing and fabricating information in that sworn affidavit used to get the warrant for Allen's property.
And what's the basis for that accusation?
It centers on eyewitness descriptions. They claim Betsy Blair saw a man on the bridge, but her description didn't match Richard Allen. They argue Liggett needed her sighting to fit his timeline, so he concealed the inconsistencies.
Okay, that's one witness. What else?
Blair also saw a car at the CPS parking lot around the key time frame. The defense says her description looked nothing like Richard Allen's black Ford Focus, suggesting maybe Allen's car left earlier than Liggett implied.
So challenging the timing and identification based on her statements.
And then there's Sarah Carbaugh. She saw a man walking on the road. The defense says she described him wearing a tan coat and being muddy, not bloody. They claim this directly contradicts Liggett's statement in the affidavit that Carbaugh saw a man matching Allen's description with a blue coat and bloody clothing.
Huge discrepancies, if accurate.
Absolutely. This is the heart of the Franks challenge. If they can prove Liggett knowingly or recklessly included false statements or omitted crucial facts to get that warrant, well, the evidence found via that warrant could potentially be suppressed, thrown out.
Which could be devastating for the prosecution's case.
Potentially, yes. It's a high bar to meet legally, but the allegations are incredibly serious.
And the memorandum raises another disturbing issue about the guards at Westville.
Yes, this is also extremely serious. They allege that corrections officers with Odinist beliefs, specifically naming a Skate Robinson and a Skate Jones, were deliberately positioned to guard or intimidate Richard Allen starting around April 2023.
Guard and intimidate? How?
They claim these officers were often within earshot during Allen's visits with his lawyers and his wife, potentially overhearing confidential conversations.
That's a major breach of attorney-client privilege, if true.
A huge one. They also state both officers wore patches associated with Odinism or Norse paganism on their uniform.
Really? On their official uniforms?
That's the allegation. And they add that Stishit Robinson suddenly removed his patches after a defense deposition, where it became clear the defense was aware of this whole Odinist angle in the case.
The timing seems suggestive, according to them.
It does, and they tie it back to Sheriff Liggett again, claiming he refused to support transferring Allen to a closer jail, citing transportation issues, which, the defense argues, conveniently kept Allen at Westville under the watch of these specific officers.
These are deeply troubling claims. If true, it suggests potential interference and intimidation right inside the prison walls.
Grave allegations indeed, suggesting a conflict of interest, potential monitoring. It raises fundamental questions about the fairness of his detention and his ability to prepare a defense.
And throughout all these claims about alternative suspects and guards, the defense keeps hammering home what point about Richard Allen himself.
They are emphatic. Richard Allen, they say, has zero connection to Odinism, no ties to any religious cult, and critically, they state there's no forensic evidence, no DNA, no electronic data linking him directly to the crime scene itself.
No DNA. They claim the sheriff even admitted that.
They point to Liggett's own testimony allegedly confirming the lack of DNA linking Allen. They argue his whole reason for seeking the search warrant, years later, was weak, built on shaky ground.
Like the report from that DNR officer.
Right, Dan Dolan. He interviewed Allen early on, but the defense claims his report had major errors, misspelled Allen's name, wasn't recorded, and yet Liggett relied on this potentially flawed report to place Allen on the trails at a key time.
And they keep circling back to the witness description, inconsistencies compared to what Liggett put in the affidavit.
Exactly. They're building a case that not only were their viable alternative suspects ignored, but the evidence actually used to target their client is fundamentally flawed and lacks concrete forensic backing.
So based on all that, they're demanding the Franks hearing to challenge the warrant.
Yes, to argue the warrant was invalid due to those alleged falsehoods and omissions by Liggett. If successful, evidence suppression could follow.
And they filed that verified motion for immediate transfer of custody because of the confinement conditions and those alleged Odinite guards.
Correct. Seeking relocation to a standard pretrial jail facility. They even bolster this by citing reports, like from the Southern Poverty Law Center, about the rise of white supremacist Odinist groups in prisons. And they mention consulting an expert, a former state trooper, apparently familiar with hate groups, who supposedly confirmed Odinist activity in Indiana prisons.
So they're bringing in external context to support their concerns about Westville.
Right, trying to show their fears aren't unfounded, that this is a recognized issue within correctional systems.
Okay, wow, that memorandum is packed.
Yeah.
But there were other major motions filed around this time too, right? about the judge.
Yes, amidst all this, the defense also filed multiple verified motions to disqualify Judge Francis Gull.
To remove the judge from the case entirely. Why?
They allege a lack of impartiality and fairness. The list of reasons is long and, quite pointed. They claim defense filings were removed or hidden from the official case timeline, that Judge Gull told the defense attorneys to cease work on the case, that she basically coerced them into offering to withdraw.
Coerce them. How?
The filings suggest pressure was applied, leading to oral requests for withdrawal. They also accuse her of showing umbrage, like anger or offense, at the defense's arguments while ignoring delays or alleged false statements from the prosecution.
So unequal treatment, they're claiming.
That's the core of it. They argue she created an impossible ethical bind for them and violated Indiana's rules for judges on impartiality, fairness, avoiding impropriety, and even the appearance of impropriety. These are extremely serious charges against a sitting judge.
Absolutely. Filing to disqualify the judge is a dramatic move.
It signifies a complete breakdown in trust, essentially. The defense is arguing they cannot get a fair shake with her presiding over the case.
And finally, there was also an issue involving the defense team themselves, attorneys Rozzi and Baldwin. Something about a leak.
Yes, it seems concerns were raised about their potential disqualification due to an alleged leak of crime scene photos.
So they had to defend their own position, too.
Exactly. They filed responses detailing how they handled it. They explained their communications with the court and prosecutor, said they took steps to address the leak, which they blamed on a third party, and strongly affirmed they never authorized any release of sensitive material.
What was their argument against being disqualified?
They argued it would be totally impractical, given how much work they'd already done, the sheer volume of discovery they'd reviewed, and their accumulated work product. They insisted their actions hadn't compromised Allen's defense.
Did they offer any other context?
They did subtly point out that there had been previous instances where sensitive case information seemed to reach the media, possibly from sources closer to the investigation, not them. And crucially, they included letters or statements from Richard Allen himself saying he wanted them, Rozzi and Baldwin, to continue as his lawyers.
So getting the client's explicit backing on record.
Yes, a critical piece in pushing back against any move to disqualify them. It highlights the complexity everyone involved seems to be under intense scrutiny.
Okay, let's try to pull this all together. We've gone through a lot of court filings. What's the big picture emerging from this deep dive?
Well, it's clear this is anything but a straightforward case. The court record reveals this incredibly complex, deeply contested legal battle. You have the defense raising fundamental questions about everything from Allen's confinement conditions,
Which they called inhumane.
to the thoroughness and, frankly, the bias they allege existed in the initial police investigation,
Focusing on those alternative suspects, the Odinism angle,
to the very validity of the search warrant used to gather key evidence against Allen.
the whole Frank's notice, and the allegations against Sheriff Liggett.
The deeply concerning claims about Odinite guards potentially intimidating or monitoring Allen in prison.
That's a chilling aspect.
And finally, even challenging the impartiality of the presiding judge herself, seeking her disqualification multiple times. It paints a picture vastly different from, a simple narrative of guilt.
It really does. So what are the big lingering questions this leaves us with, especially thinking about the listener?
I think the filings force us to ask, how does this intense legal battle with these specific allegations of investigative flaws, potential bias, questionable evidence gathering, how does all that square with the pursuit of justice? How does it impact the presumption of innocence for Richard Allen?
Right. The sheer volume of contested issues is staggering.
It is, and it raises questions about transparency and fairness in the process itself. The Franks notice, the motions to disqualify Judge Gull, these are pivotal moments. Their outcomes could drastically change the case's direction.
So for anyone wanting to follow this further, the path involves keeping an eye on those public court records when available and following reliable news coverage.
Exactly. This dive shows that really understanding a complex case like this means engaging with a lot of contested information, a lot of back and forth. It's not simple.
Definitely not. So a final thought to leave people with. Something to chew on.
Maybe this. Considering how much detail the defense put into outlining alternative suspects and alleged investigative failures, what does it tell us about the challenges, maybe even the risks, in investigations that appear to focus very heavily on one individual early on, potentially leaving other avenues, according to these documents at least, less explored? It's something to ponder as this case moves forward. So we've got this really incredible archive, I mean, a huge collection of documents, right? Court filings, police scanner audio, even an interrogation transcript, trial exhibits, all tied to this one very complex legal case.
Yeah, quite a set of materials.
And what we want to do in this deep dive is, you know, pull out the key stuff, build a timeline, understand the really significant moments that these sources reveal.
Kind of cut through the noise.
Exactly. Get to the core of what happened, why it matters, without getting totally buried in the sheer volume of detail.
And it is a lot of detail. What's fascinating is how it stretches, right from those first hours in February 2017.
When the girls first went missing.
Right. All the way through the trial in late 2024, and even some follow-up court actions in early 2025.
It's a long journey.
A very long and intricate story, yeah. And these documents, they give us different angles, different perspectives on how the case actually moved through the legal system.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning then, those first really frantic hours. You mentioned the police scanner audio from February 13th, 2017, the day Liberty and Abigail disappeared. That really sets the scene, doesn't it?
It does. At 5:57 p.m., you hear this call.
Yeah.
Well, a record shows the Carroll County Fire Department being asked to head to this station.
For a briefing.
Yeah, for a briefing about 2 missing juveniles. It sounds almost procedural.
Routine, yeah. But it's the first official flag, isn't it? The start of everything we know now.
It marks that moment. Then the next morning, February 14th, the ISP scanner traffic. Well, it picks up the search.
And you start hearing more detail.
You do. Discussions about locating Liberty Rosaline German and Abigail Joyce Williams. It gives us those basic descriptions.
Right. Height, hair color.
Liberty, born late 2002, 5'4", blonde, blue eyes, tie-dye shirt, gray sweats. Abigail, born mid-2003, also 5'4", red or hazel eyes, gray zip-up, red shirt, jeans.
And crucially, where they were last seen.
Exactly. The High Bridge in Delphi. Around 1:00 p.m. the day before, February 13th. So this audio, it establishes that initial timeline, the basic facts known right at the start.
And then, well, later that same day, February 14th, the scanner audio, it takes a really dark turn.
Yeah.
There's that brief mention about needing rope and bringing a body out near 300 North.
It's so stark, almost clinical, like you said.
Chilling, really. It signals that the worst had happened.
That one sort of understated line, it just says so much, doesn't it? The shift from a search to, well, a recovery.
A heartbreaking moment captured right there in the initial records.
It is. Okay, so let's fast forward quite a bit, actually, several years later.
To the arrest.
To the arrest of Richard Allen, October 26, 2022. That's the next huge pivot point.
And immediately the focus shifts, right?
Yeah.
Into the legal system. The court documents start piling up.
Straight away. The very next day, October 27th, we see Nick McClellan filing this verified request to prohibit public access.
Alongside the actual charges, count 1, count 2.
And the probable cause affidavit. That's the document laying out the initial reasons for the arrest.
And this immediate move to seal things, it just screams sensitivity, doesn't it? Right from the get-go.
It does. But what's also really telling is how quickly the media pushes back. You see this tension immediately.
So the judge grants a temporary seal.
Right. On October 28th, Judge Diener enters an order sealing court records, but pending a public hearing. And the state also files his own request to prohibit access that same day.
So a double request to keep things under wraps.
Yeah, it really shows how critical controlling the information flow is seen in these high-profile cases. It sets up this ongoing tug-of-war, really. Public access versus protecting the investigation.
And then things move pretty fast in late October, early November 22.
They do. You've got the press release on Halloween, October 31st, formally announcing Allen's arrest and his transfer to White County Jail a few days prior.
And a letter from Allen himself to the court.
Yeah, postmarked November 1st. We don't know the contents from this record, just that it was sent. Then November 2nd, Judge Diener acknowledges that public hearing is coming up.
But what about sealing the records?
Exactly. Scheduled for November 22nd. And the order mentions the need to balance the public's right to know against, potential harm to the legal process.
That hearing on the 22nd sounds like a key early moment.
It really was. And just the day before, you see the media lawyers filing their brief.
The media interveners' pre-hearing brief.
Right. Clearly stating their case for public access right from the start. They wanted that probable cause affidavit unsealed.
And the outcome of the hearing.
Judge Gold took it under advisement, meaning no immediate decision. But interestingly, other things were scheduled that day too.
Like what?
Allen's request for bail, that hearing got set for February 2023. And the omnibus date, which is a big pretrial deadline, that got pushed back too. Judge Gull also formally noted the media's brief in a separate order.
Okay, so things are moving, legally speaking. Then December 2022 arrives.
And brings more developments and maybe a taste of just how intense the scrutiny was going to be.
We see a press release from Allen's defense team, Rotzi and Baldwin.
Yep, December 1st.
Yeah.
And the same day, there's that incident with Jerry Holman, the reported leak about a clerical error.
Right, that caused a bit of a stir publicly.
It did. And also on December 1st, Judge Gull sets another important hearing for January 13th, 2023.
What was that one for?
Two really big things. One, the state's motion to stop the parties talking publicly, what became known as the gag order.
And the second?
The defense's motion for a change of venue. They were already arguing they couldn't get a fair trial in Carroll County.
Makes sense given the local impact. Did the judge rule on the gag order quickly?
Very quickly. Granted the state's motion the very next day, December 2nd, but pending that full hearing in January.
So a temporary gag order first.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
And the order was pretty explicit, warning about potential contempt of court if anyone violated it. It really put a clamp on public statements outside the courtroom.
Okay, moving into 2023. January, there's an order about courthouse decorum.
Yeah, January 10th, just before that big January 13th hearing. It sets rules for conduct inside the courthouse.
Yeah.
Probably anticipating a lot of public and media interest.
Smart move. And at the hearing itself on the 13th.
Judge Gull made the gag order official, granting the state's motion. And crucially, the court agreed with the defense about the jury.
That they couldn't get an impartial one locally.
Right. They decided the jury would have to be picked from a different county, which is a pretty significant step.
Acknowledging that potential for local bias.
Definitely. Then a bit later, January 24th, there's a note about a confidential order entered by Judge Gull. We don't know the specifics as it remains sealed.
Gotcha. February 2023, the media lawyers are back.
They are. Filed a renewed motion on the 10th, still pushing for access. And then on February 17th, Judge Gull granted the state's motion for a protective order.
Okay, what does a protective order cover exactly?
It's all about discovery, the evidence and information shared between the prosecution and defense before trial. This order set strict rules.
Like what kind of rules?
Things like limiting copies, saying the material could only be used to prepare the defense, no public display, and only the legal teams, their investigators, and expert witnesses could see it. And those experts had to formally agree to the rules.
So keeping a tight lid on the evidence itself.
Exactly. And mandating redaction of sensitive stuff like Social Security numbers or details about the victims who were minors.
Then June 28th, 2023. That sounds like a big day for transparency.
It was a significant shift, yeah. Judge Gull issued an order unsealing a whole bunch of previously confidential filings.
Why the change?
The order cited the strong public interest in transparency, especially in such a high-profile case.
But not everything was unsealed.
Correct. Some key things stayed under wraps. Most importantly, the original probable cause affidavit, also transport orders for Allen, and any ex parte motions from the defense. Those are motions made without the other side present.
Interesting. But the court even provided a link for the public to access the unsealed stuff.
They did, which was a pretty notable step towards openness. Even with those exceptions, it gave the public a lot more insight into the legal arguments and the case's path up to that point.
But that probable cause affidavit remaining sealed, that must have fueled speculation.
Oh, absolutely. That document detailing the initial evidence for the arrest remained a major point of public curiosity and, likely, frustration for the media.
Okay, fast forward again to October 2023. More motions being ruled on.
Yes. Judge Gull addressed several defense motions then. One was a request to broadcast the proceedings.
Televise the trial.
Essentially, yes. That was denied as being too broad, though the judge didn't completely shut the door on maybe a narrower request later.
Well,
Their motion to block subpoenas for Allen's private medical and mental health records, that was granted. The prosecution wouldn't get those.
okay.
And a motion to immediately transfer Allen out of state custody was denied. The judge also noted that the Franks hearing motions were still under review.
Remind us what a Franks hearing is about.
Sure. It's a hearing where the defense challenges the truthfulness of statements made in an affidavit used to get a search warrant.
So they're saying the police might have misled the judge to get the warrant.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
They argue false statements were made intentionally or recklessly, and if those statements were necessary for probable cause, the warrant could be invalidated.
And any evidence found using that warrant could be thrown out.
Exactly. Suppressed. So the fact those motions were pending meant the defense was likely questioning the very basis of some key evidence gathering.
That's a major challenge. Okay, so things get even more complex legally in November 2023.
They do. The defense took the unusual step of going to the Indiana Supreme Court. They filed a petition for a writ of mandamus.
But what now?
A writ of mandamus. It's basically asking a higher court to order a lower court official, in this case Judge Gull, to perform a specific duty.
And what duty did they want performed?
They wanted the Supreme Court to order Judge Gull to provide access to certain court records, specifically including the transcript of an in-chambers meeting, one held privately, not in open court.
Ah, okay. How did that play out?
Well, Judge Gull's lawyers asked for more time to respond. The Supreme Court did get involved, initially allowing the defense to respond to any objections.
But did the Supreme Court grant the writ?
Ultimately, no. On December 1st, 2023, they denied the petition.
Why?
Their reasoning was that Judge Gull had already issued another order on November 14th that basically resolved most of the issues the defense had raised.
What did that November 14th order do?
It put some previously excluded documents back into the Public Court Record System, the CCS, and it clarified the rules for public access moving forward.
So the Supreme Court felt the problem was already fixed, more or less?
Essentially, yes. They said the trial court order addressed the core requests. They also used the opportunity to kind of reiterate Indiana's rules on access to court records, emphasizing openness with only limited specific exceptions.
So back to the trial court it goes.
Pretty much. The Supreme Court affirmed the existing rules and indicated Judge Gull's actions were sufficient for now.
Okay, 2024. Getting closer to the trial, but still lots of legal action.
Definitely. February 2024, Judge Gull sets hearings. One is for the state wanting to amend the charges, the motion to amend information.
Changing the formal charges.
Could be adding, modifying, clarifying, and also a hearing on a verified information of contemptuous conduct.
Meaning the prosecution thought someone defied a court order.
That's what it suggests, yes. Although, interestingly, the defense filed for clarification about that contempt hearing, and Judge Gull denied their request without even holding a hearing on it.
And discovery issues pop up again.
They do. Judge Gull ordered the defense to hand over their discovery materials to the state by March 8th.
But not everything.
She specifically said she wouldn't force them to provide deposition exhibits early. But she did order them to provide any exhibits for a March 18th hearing by March 7th. So deadlines are being set.
And then a twist. The defense asks for an early trial.
Yeah, that was in March 2024. It's not always the defense pushing for speed. Judge Gull actually granted it.
When was it set for?
Initially, May 13th through May 31st, 2024. Very soon.
Wow. And that March 18th hearing happened?
It did. It covered both that contempt motion and a defense motion to dismiss the charges entirely. Then, just a few days later, March 22nd, another hearing.
What was this one about?
This was specifically on a defense motion to dismiss, based on the idea that the state had destroyed potentially exculpatory evidence that might have helped Allen.
That's a serious accusation. What happened with that?
Judge Gull took that one under advisement, meaning she'd rule later. At the same hearing, she denied the state's request for another protective order, this time about evidence from the Department of Correction.
But she still put some limits on the defense.
Yes. She prohibited them from sharing any personal practices of people who were deposed. Another balancing act, it seems, between access and privacy.
So the early trial date in May, did it stick?
No, it didn't. As May approached, there was another hearing. The defense essentially said, look, this isn't enough time.
Not enough time for the trial itself.
Right, given how complex the case was, how much evidence there was. So they made a big move.
Which was?
They waived Richard Allen's constitutional right to a speedy trial and asked for a continuance, a delay.
And the judge agreed.
Yes, Judge Gull granted the motion. The trial was then reset for October 14th through November 15th, 2024.
So a significant delay. And around the same time, another motion to get rid of the judge.
Yep, mid-May, the defense filed their second verified motion to disqualify Judge Gull, raising impartiality concerns again.
Did that affect the schedule?
It did, temporarily. Judge Gull canceled some pretrial hearings scheduled for late May, specifically so she could review that second disqualification motion.
And her ruling on that second attempt?
End of May, she denied it. Issued a detailed order addressing every single allegation the defense raised. She wasn't stepping down.
Okay, so the case keeps moving towards the rescheduled October trial date. Any more major motions before then?
Yes, July and August saw more activity. Late July hearing on several defense motions bundled together.
Like what?
A motion to get rid of a safekeeping order related to Allen's custody, a motion to compel discovery from the prosecution and for sanctions against them, and importantly, a second motion to dismiss, this time based on supposedly newly discovered evidence.
A lot going on there. How did the judge rule?
After the hearing, in mid-August, Judge Gull denied that second motion to dismiss. And then in September, she denied another defense request.
What was that?
They wanted to certify some of her earlier rulings for interlocutory appeal, meaning they wanted to appeal those specific decisions to a higher court before the trial even finished.
Trying to get a higher court to weigh in midstream.
Exactly. By denying that, Judge Gull kept the case firmly on track for that October 14th trial start date.
All these pretrial motions, it really shows the strategic maneuvering, doesn't it?
Oh, completely. It's standard in complex criminal cases. Both sides are trying to shape the battlefield. You know, what evidence gets in, what legal arguments are allowed, how the story gets told to the jury.
Okay, so finally, October 14th, 2024, the trial begins.
It does. Runs until November 5th. And that trial exhibit list. Wow. It gives you a real sense of what the jury saw and heard.
What kind of things were on it? Let's start with the basics.
Well, poignant stuff first. That Snapchat photo of Libby and Abby taken just before everything happened.
Oh, wow.
Then lots of visuals of the scene, overview shots, zoomed-in photos of the Munon High Bridge itself, the surrounding area, drone footage too, giving that aerial view.
Setting the location.
Exactly. Maps of the trails, nearby properties, and then, crucially, photos from the crime scene, documenting where things were found.
Including items belonging to the girls.
Clothing, shoes, yes. And that very significant piece of evidence, the .40 caliber Smith & Wesson cartridge casing found at the scene.
And the forensic reports analyzing all that?
Absolutely. Those lab reports would have been critical for the prosecution trying to link items, especially that casing, potentially back to the defendant.
What about digital evidence?
Yep. Listed are digital media extractions from phones. Could be texts, call logs, location data, photos, videos, audio. Lots of possibilities there.
And Alan's own words.
Very important.
Yeah.
The jury heard recordings, saw transcripts of interviews with Richard Allen from October 13th and 26th, 2022.
Before and right around his arrest.
Right. And also audio recordings of phone calls he made from jail, from the correctional facilities while he was awaiting trial.
That's a lot of different types of evidence. Who testified?
A wide range. Law enforcement officers involved in every stage of the investigation. Forensic experts explaining the science behind the evidence analysis. Correctional officers who interacted with Allen post-arrest.
Any other significant exhibits?
Photos taken inside Richard Allen's home were shown. They apparently included pictures of knives and a handgun.
The gun potentially linked to the casing?
That would likely be the prosecution's argument. Also, autopsy schematics, visual diagrams related to the victim's injuries, and HHS video footage.
HHS.
Likely surveillance footage from nearby homes or businesses, along with analysis of that footage. It really paints a picture of a very detailed, multi-layered case presented over several weeks.
The sheer amount. The jury had a massive task.
An immense task, connecting the dots between the scene evidence, the forensic analysis, Allen's statements, items from his home. It's a complex narrative the prosecution built.
Let's zoom in on that interrogation transcript for a minute. October 26, 2022, Detective Holman questioning Allen. What stands out?
Well, Allen's repeated denials are striking. He keeps saying there's no way a bullet from his gun could be at the scene.
Even when Holman explains ballistic.
Right. Holman used that analogy, doesn't he? About the firing pin leaving a unique fingerprint on the cartridge. A microscopic signature.
Like a fingerprint for a gun.
Exactly. A good way to explain it. But Allen apparently continues to deny it's possible his gun was involved. That denial, especially after the explanation, is likely something investigators, and later the prosecution, would focus heavily on.
What about why Allen went to the police in the first place, back in 2017?
He explains that. Says he went the day the police asked anyone who'd been on the trails to come forward.
Did his wife tell him to go?
Holman asks that. Allen says no. But then Holman mentions that Allen's wife is actually being interviewed by other officers right at that moment.
Implying maybe their stories weren't quite lining up.
Or at least raising a question about it. A potential discrepancy in their recollections of who prompted that initial contact with police. It adds another layer, something investigators would probe.
Did Holman ask about Allen personally, his state of mind?
He did. He brought up anger issues, depression, specifically mentioning things Allen's wife had apparently told investigators.
So, using information from her interview in his questioning?
Seems like it. Holman even throws out hypotheticals, like maybe Allen was set up, Or maybe he didn't act alone, exploring different angles.
And Alan's response to carrying his gun.
He sticks to his story, only when he was mushroom hunting or fishing. That specific claim, of course, directly clashes with the later forensic finding of a cartridge potentially linked to his gun at the crime scene, where he wasn't doing either activity.
A major inconsistency.
A key point the prosecution would almost certainly hammer home at trial.
Okay, shifting back to the court process. We mentioned those motions to disqualify Judge Gull. 2 separate attempts.
Yes, the defense filed twice, arguing she couldn't be impartial in the case and should be removed.
That feels like a pretty drastic step.
It is. It signals a real breakdown in trust, or at least a claimed one, between the defense and the judge. They're fundamentally questioning the fairness of the process under her oversight.
But both times she refused to step down.
Correct. She denied both motions, and importantly, she issued detailed written orders explaining her reasoning, addressing each specific point the defense raised, showing her justification for staying on the case.
And related to court transparency, the media requests to record.
Right. We saw multiple instances noted in the documents where media outlets asked for permission to record or broadcast the court proceedings.
And the answer was always no.
Consistently denied, both before and during the trial itself. It really underscores the court's, or specifically Judge Gull's, firm control over how information flowed directly from the courtroom.
Even though many written documents were eventually released.
Exactly. It's that classic balancing act. Public access versus ensuring a fair trial, preventing witness intimidation or jury influence, avoiding sensationalism. Courts often prioritize the latter when it comes to cameras in the courtroom, especially in high-profile, sensitive cases like this.
Okay, one last point on the timeline. That trial delay. Set for May 2024, then pushed to October.
Right. The defense initially asked for that early trial, got it, but then reversed course.
Why the change of heart?
They argued the May timeframe was just too short. Not enough time to adequately prepare, review all the discovery, line up witnesses, plan strategy for such a massive, complex case.
And waiving the speedy trial right was necessary for that delay.
Yes. To get the continuance granted, Alan had to formally waive that constitutional right. It highlights just how much work goes into preparing for a trial of this scale, ensuring both sides really have a fair shot.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, it's really clear these documents, taken together, offer this incredibly detailed, sometimes partial, but still revealing look at the case's long journey.
Years of legal twists and turns. We've hit the main milestones, haven't we? The big filings, the key rulings, the kinds of evidence that finally made it to the jury.
Yeah, but it's worth remembering, like you said, this is still a summary.
Absolutely. Every single document we touched on, the filings, the audio clips, the exhibit list, probably contains way more nuance, more specific arguments, more details. There's always more depth if you dig into the source material itself.
Definitely. Which brings us to a final thought for everyone listening. When you consider everything we've discussed, the slow grind of the legal process, the specific types of evidence presented, all the strategic moves by both sides, how does that shape your own understanding?
Yeah, how does it make you think about the challenges, the immense difficulty in finding justice, or even just clarity in a case like this? One with so much tragedy, so much public attention, and so many complex layers.
Something to really ponder. And for those whose interest is piqued, exploring the publicly available documents themselves could definitely offer even richer perspectives on this ongoing story. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really digging into a case that's captured so much attention. Indiana v. Richard M. Allen. You've provided just an incredible amount of material here. Court documents, filings, basically a timeline stretching from, well, the very tragic start in February 2017 right up to this April 2025.
A massive collection, really comprehensive.
It is. So our mission today is to walk through this timeline together, pull out those key events, the turning points, and maybe highlight some of the lingering questions that these documents bring up for you.
And the sheer volume, it really speaks for itself, doesn't it? It shows the years of intense investigation, the legal back and forth, the public scrutiny. It highlights just how complex this whole thing has been.
Absolutely. A testament to the effort involved, for sure, and the public interest. So yeah, think of this as us sorting through this huge stack together, finding the major signposts and trying to connect the dots for you.
Okay.
Because at the heart of it all, we can't forget, is the terrible tragedy, the murders of 2 young girls in Delphi back in February 2017. Right.
And these documents, they trace that investigation from the very beginning. The shifts, the different leads they chased, and eventually how they arrived at Richard Allen's arrest and trial. Okay, so let's jump in. Let's start with those very early stages, February 2017 through early 2019. It kicks off almost immediately, doesn't it? We see Teresa Liebert's affidavit, her sketch from February 13th, describing someone she saw that morning.
Yeah, right at the start, that eyewitness account, the sketch, those were crucial first pieces for law enforcement. And at the same time, they began collecting evidence at the scene, things like sticks, apparently.
Right?
And also that initial digital evidence. Libby German's Snapchat pictures, taken so close to when they disappeared, that became incredibly important. A last glimpse. And we also see very early on, Feb 13th again, phone records related to someone named Elvis Fields being looked at. Shows how quickly they were trying to identify people in the area. And it seems like alibis were checked almost instantly, too. There's a Murphy 2018 report, also dated February 13th, 2017, already detailing alibis for Rod Abrams, Ned Smith, and this Elvis Fields.
Right.
They cast a wide net fast.
They really did. That initial phase, it's often a very broad sweep,
Right.
trying to figure out who was where.
Yeah.
And we also start seeing some maybe slightly strange digital stuff pop up. Brad Holder's deleted Facebook post from February 14th, this Goodfellas meme he posted
Yeah.
that generated tips, interviews. It's funny how little digital things can become focal points.
And Elvis Fields, whose phone records they checked early, he actually gave a confession really early, morning of February 14th. That must have felt like a huge break at the time.
Oh, I'm sure. But, initial confessions, they always need serious checking against other evidence.
Mm-hmm.
The timeline shows that intense pressure, the flood of info investigators deal with right at the start.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, you had photos taken by the girl's family during their search on the 14th, giving a visual record as things unfolded.
Then, just a day later, February 15th, police release that image. The person of interest. Big public step.
Huge. Puts a face out there.
And then, interestingly, just a few days later, around the 19th, they announce this man is their official suspect. Seems remarkably quick to identify a suspect like that.
It does seem quick. And, that rapid shift from suspect to, well, later focusing elsewhere,
Yeah.
it highlights a real challenge, doesn't it? The
yeah.
pressure for quick answers versus the need for solid evidence.
Right.
That early, maybe misdirection could affect where resources go, maybe even public trust later on.
Right.
And we keep seeing the digital angle reports on Logan Holder's phone, Libby German's phone, Feb 14th, 15th, digital forensics right from the get-go.
Then by March 2017, they announced this normalization process for the investigation. What does that usually mean? Sounds like a gear shift.
Yeah, normalization probably signals moving from that immediate, intense, first few weeks response to something more methodical long-term.
Yeah.
Deeper analysis, maybe broadening the scope beyond the initial focus. And you see that broadening. There's a April 2017 report about Orion Boucher. Shows they were looking wider.
And then July 2017, a whole new sketch of the suspect. That's a big change visually for the public.
Big change. It strongly suggests, maybe more interviews or a deeper look at existing info led them to revise how they thought the suspect looked.
Makes sense.
And these revisions, they can be confusing publicly, but it happens in complex cases as more info comes in. And we see they were still looking at earlier people, like Brad Holder's second interview in August 2017, more tips about him.
Also in August and September 2017, something potentially worrying, reports of DVR malfunctions. That makes you wonder if key footage was lost.
Oh, absolutely. DVR problems are a stark reminder that digital evidence isn't foolproof.
Wow.
Losing surveillance footage, that could create real blind spots.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they kept pushing the digital side. Got LG's iCloud data in October 17, AW's Google data in April 18. Just underscores how vital digital forensics had become.
And we see personnel changes, too. Investigator Purdy reassigned in March 2018. Todd Click recruited in August 2018. Suggests maybe tweaking the strategy, bringing in fresh eyes?
Yeah, could be. Reassigning people, bringing new investigators in. They can inject new energy, different expertise into a long case. Shows leadership is evaluating things, making adjustments.
And it's interesting, even as late as December 2018, concerns pop up again about Brad Holder, his alibi, getting rid of an old phone and car. So people looked at early on weren't just forgotten.
Exactly. Shows thoroughness, right? Leads aren't just closed. They get revisited if new info appears or something doesn't quite add up from before. And we see more activity continuing interviews with Amber Holder in 2019, a search warrant for Johnny Messer's phone in January 2019, still exploring different paths.
Then another shift in April 2019, a New Direction press conference. And someone named Vito is assigned to Unified Command. Sounds significant again.
Yeah, new direction likely means a renewed push or maybe a shift in their main working theories. Vito joining Unified Command suggests a change in leadership or a key addition, maybe bringing specific skills.
Okay.
And we also see technology advancing a geofence warrant sent to Google in November 2019, then a report back with geolocation data, using tracking tech to see who was near the area.
So that brings us to 2020. How did things develop from there, leading eventually towards Richard Allen?
Well, the period from 2020 to October 2022, it seems maybe more focused but still complex. One event mentioned is an August 2020 interview with Kegan Kline.
Ah, yes.
Now, the details aren't heavy in these documents, but his name, as we know, became pretty relevant in the wider public discussion later.
Right. And then March 2022, Vito gets reassigned to a different case. Another personnel shift in command. Maybe priorities changed.
It could suggest that, yeah. Either priorities shifted or perhaps other leads were demanding more attention. But interestingly, in September 2022, there's a note about reviewing a tip narrative from way back in 2017.
Going back to the beginning.
Exactly. Sometimes looking at old tips with fresh eyes or with new context can be the key to cracking something open.
Then October 13th, 2022. That date really jumps out. An affidavit for a search warrant filed, the warrant signed and returned, and then interviews with both Kathy and Richard Allen, all on one day.
Yeah, that's a flurry of activity.
Yeah.
It strongly suggests the investigation hit a critical point, leading right to Richard Allen. That affidavit for the search warrant, that would have laid out the probable cause why they believed evidence might be at his home.
Okay.
And interviewing both Kathy and Richard on the same day. Key for getting initial statements, maybe seeing if accounts matched up.
Just a few days after that, October 17th, there's talk about picking up a Wise vehicle, so the search wasn't just the house.
Standard procedure, really.
Huh.
Seizing and checking a suspect's car. Cars can hold crucial evidence, trace materials, belongings, potential links.
Gotcha.
Then, October 19th, certificates of analysis come back from the ISP lab. These results, likely forensic info, probably really help solidify that probable cause against Allen.
Which leads directly to October 26th, 2022, Richard Allen interrogated, booked. And the next day, charges filed, along with the probable cause affidavit. This is when he formally becomes the accused.
Right. That whole sequence, the warrant, interviews, lab results, interrogation, then boom, charges. And the affidavit, it points to investigators believing they had a substantial amount of evidence to move forward with his arrest and prosecution.
So after the arrest, end of October 2022, there's the press release. But that's really just the start of the court phase, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The post-arrest phase in a case like this, it's all about legal maneuvering. November 2022, court records get sealed.
Right, I remember that.
And that immediately sparks legal fights over public access. Media interveners get involved. Shows the intense interest. The court order from November 2nd explains the reasoning for sealing balancing public right to know with other concerns. The judge's comments in that order about misinformation and potential impacts of disclosure, they're quite telling.
Then we see some shuffling with his defense team. Baldwin and Rotzi appointed, then they withdraw, then they're reinstated later. Plus, public defender Scrimmin and Labrado stepping in temporarily. Seems a bit unstable.
That kind of back and forth with lawyers in high-profile cases, it can signal different things, maybe strategy disagreements, conflicts of interest needing resolution, other professional issues.
Okay.
The temporary public defenders just ensured his right to counsel was always covered during those changes.
So once the defense team was more settled, they start filing motions. Standard stuff maybe, but critical change of venue.
Right. Arguing they couldn't get a fair jury locally due to publicity.
Motions to suppress evidence.
Trying to get evidence thrown out, arguing it was obtained improperly. Big deal is successful.
That's in motions for Frank's hearings? What's that exactly?
A Frank's hearing challenges the truthfulness of the affidavit used to get the search warrant, basically arguing the officer lied or showed reckless disregard for the truth. If successful, it could invalidate the warrant.
I see. And they also filed ex parte motions. These were about funding for experts, investigators.
Exactly. Crucial for the defense to do their own analysis, build their case. The court granting that funding shows the importance of giving the defendant resources for a proper defense.
And lots of disputes over discovery, the evidence exchange, and a protective order to manage it all. Must have been a mountain of material.
Oh, huge amounts, I'm sure. Discovery disputes are common in complex cases, and a protective order is needed to control sensitive info, stop leaks, ensure a fair process. The one from Feb 17, 2023 would have set clear rules.
And Judge Gull is central here, ruling on all these motions, bail, subpoenas, what evidence is in, what's out. Her decisions really shaped the case heading to trial.
Absolutely central. The judge interprets the law, makes the calls on countless requests. Those rulings dictate what the jury hears, who testifies, how the trial runs, even things like managing the defendant's transport, big logistical challenges the judge handles.
Trial dates got set, then reset a few times, finally landing in October, November 2024. Scheduling something this complex takes time.
It does. Getting everyone ready, resolving pretrial issues, it often means delays. Then, right before trial, both sides file motions in the line.
Ah, yes. What are those again?
Think of them as pretrial arguments, trying to get the judge to rule specific evidence in or out before the jury even hears about it. Helps shape the trial narrative, keeps potentially prejudicial stuff away from the jury.
And we see the defense pushing hard to bring in evidence about Odinism, and also pointing fingers back at Elvis Fields and Brad Holder from the early investigation. The judge's rulings on that must have been critical.
Hugely critical. Judge Gull's order from September 3rd, 2024 addressed those. It basically set a high bar the defense needed to show a real relevant connection for that alternative evidence, not just suggest things.
So they couldn't just throw theories out there.
Pretty much. The defense strategy often involves alternatives to create reasonable doubt, but the law has rules. You need more than just hinting someone else might have done it. The judge decides what meets that threshold.
Okay. And then jury selection happened in Allen County, not Carroll County, where the crime occurred.
That's common, right? To find less biased jurors.
Very common in high publicity cases. Move it somewhere folks haven't been saturated with media coverage, try to get a fair and impartial jury seated.
So the trial itself, October 18th to November 6th, 2024. Prosecution witnesses included Libby German's family, Sarah Carbaugh, the bridge guy witness,
Right.
and forensic experts like Dr. Kaur, Stacy Bozanovsky, presenting scientific findings.
Yeah, the prosecution builds their case piece by piece. Witness testimony, forensics, DNA, ballistics, whatever they had, maybe statements from the defendant. Those witnesses paint a picture of the kinds of evidence they likely used.
And the defense called witnesses too. Max Baker, maybe for character. Doug Carter, the ISP superintendent, surprisingly.
That is notable, the head of ISP testifying for the defense.
Betsy Blair and their own experts, Dr. Stuart Gracian, Dr. Aaron Warren, probably challenging the state's expert. Exactly. The defense counters the prosecution's evidence, maybe questions the investigation itself, offers alternative interpretations. Calling someone like Carter, that could be a tactic to challenge the official narrative from within, so to speak.
So after all that, defense rests, state offers rebuttal witnesses, then it goes to the jury. And the verdict. Convictions on counts 3 and 4. Counts 1 and 2 vacated double jeopardy.
Right. The jury made its decision based on the evidence presented. The double jeopardy part is a legal thing, means you can't be punished twice for essentially the same criminal act based on how the charges overlapped.
Got it. Then sentencing, December 20th, 2024. 65 years for each count served consecutively. That's 130 years total, a very long sentence.
Yes. Reflects the seriousness of the crimes found by the jury. Consecutive means you serve one full sentence, then start the next.
And right after sentencing, Allen says he'll appeal. State public defender appointed. And the gag order that was in place for so long, lifted.
Yep. Appealing is a fundamental right. Public defender steps in if he can't afford private counsel. And lifting the gag order post-trial is typical, allows more open discussion again.
Then more legal motions preserving evidence, keeping crime scene and autopsy photos sealed. Standard post-trial stuff.
Pretty standard.
Okay.
Need to keep evidence safe for appeals, but also protect sensitive photos from public view, usually out of respect for victims and families, and trial integrity. The court order from December the 30th addressed that sealed the photos, but denied a super broad request to preserve everything without specifics.
January 2025, the court okays 2 appellate attorneys from the public defender's office for Allen. The appeal process officially kicks off.
Right. Appeals need specialized lawyers who review the trial record for legal errors that might have affected the outcome. Often takes a team for complex cases.
And the defense filed a motion to correct error in January, first step in appeals, trying to get the trial court to fix alleged mistakes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Gives the trial judge the first chance to review potential errors. That motion was denied in February, so the defense will likely raise those same issues to the higher appellate court.
And even then, it wasn't over. Media outlets, NBCU, Twist Media filed motions wanting access to the trial exhibits Feb and March 2025. Shows the interest just doesn't die down.
Not at all. Judge Gull's order on Feb 18th talked about those requests, noting the practical challenges of managing all those exhibits while balancing public access and protecting the record. And again, the court denied a defense motion to preserve specific evidence in February, sticking to its earlier stance.
So that ongoing fight over exhibits, it really shows that tension, doesn't it? Public right to know versus managing the court process.
Definitely. Balancing transparency with the need to protect sensitive info and ensure the legal process works properly. It's a constant juggling act in these big cases.
Okay, so looking back over this whole massive timeline, several things really stand out. First, just the sheer amount of work, the years of investigation, the endless legal filings. What does that tell you about how complex this case really was?
It screams complexity, doesn't it? The number of leads chased, the data analyzed, the legal arguments hashed out.
Yeah.
It shows these cases are rarely straightforward. They take incredible resources and dedication.
And think about all the other people investigated before Allen's arrest. What does that say about the challenges of those early stages? You can't just focus on one person immediately.
No, you can't. Early stages often mean casting that wide net. Ruling people out is just as vital as ruling someone in. This timeline really shows how investigations evolve, how initial ideas might have to change based on evidence.
And the role of technology evidence, forensics, it's woven through the whole thing, from day one with phone records to geofencing and DNA later on. It's clearly reshaped how these things are investigated.
Absolutely indispensable now. Phone data, social media, location info, sophisticated lab analysis. It often provides the key links, establishes timelines, builds the case. This case is a prime example.
Then there's the constant battle over information access, the sealing orders, the media interventions, even continuing after the trial. What does that highlight about balancing public interest, media access, and the defendant's rights?
It highlights a fundamental tension. Public right to know is vital, but it has to be balanced against ensuring a fair trial, protecting privacy, preventing misinformation. This case puts that balancing act right under the microscope.
And the defense strategy pushing those alternative theories, Odinism, Fields, Holder, even though it wasn't ultimately allowed in the way they wanted, what does it show about how defense teams try to create reasonable doubt?
It's a standard, often necessary defense approach. Challenge the prosecution's narrative, suggest other possibilities. But as we saw, the legal system has strict rules. You need actual evidence linking those theories, not just speculation. The judge enforces those rules.
And finally, the big one. A verdict's in, sentencing is done, but the appeal process has started. So is it really over? What does this ongoing appeal mean for the case?
It means it's not necessarily over at the trial court level. The appeal is a crucial check, reviewing for legal errors that could have affected the outcome. There will be more scrutiny, more arguments, more decisions from higher courts. The legal journey continues.
So wrapping up this deep dive, we've traced this case, Indiana v. Richard M. Allen, through an incredibly dense timeline, from the tragedy in 2017 right up to the start of the appeals this year. Hopefully this gives you, our listener, a clear picture of the investigations, the legal hurdles, the path to that trial verdict.
And it's clear, as you said, even with a trial verdict, the process isn't finished. The appeals will bring new developments, keep the case under scrutiny, and no doubt maintain that intense public focus.
Yeah, this dive gave us the framework. But those source documents you shared, they contain so much more detail if anyone wants to dig deeper into a specific motion or event. The resources are there.
Definitely. And ultimately, this case is just a stark reminder, isn't it, of how complex the justice system is, the lasting impact of tragedy, and the incredibly long, winding road often involved in seeking resolution. It makes you think not just about the verdict, but the whole exhaustive process itself. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking into something pretty intense. It's a set of recorded phone calls.
That's right. They're labeled State Exhibit 313.
And these calls, they're between R.A., who's an inmate at the Westville Correctional Facility in Indiana, and two other people, K.A. and J.A.
We've got transcripts for 8 calls here, spanning from, November 2022 through June 2023.
So our job today really is to unpack these calls, try to figure out the key information, but also, the emotional landscape. It feels pretty heavy.
It really does.
Yeah.
And it's a raw look, isn't it? Unfiltered conversations under just immense pressure. You hear the emotion right away.
Yeah. Yes.
And sometimes the way they talk is, it's cryptic.
Yeah.
You have to listen really closely, not just what they say, but maybe what's underneath.
Okay, so let's jump into that first call, November 14th, 2022. This is R.A. talking to K.A. And yeah, that's emotional intensity you mentioned. It's right there from the start.
They keep saying he doesn't want to upset her.
Right. Tells her he loves her repeatedly. But then there's this offer he makes. It's kind of strange.
What does he say exactly?
He says, basically, if things get too much for K.A., she should tell the investigators to bring him to her. And then he'll say, quote, whatever they want.
Wow. Whatever they want. That's broad and pretty cryptic, like you said. What could that even mean?
Exactly. Is he trying to protect her? Like, take the fall, even if it's not true?
Or maybe it's just the sheer stress getting to him, saying things that aren't fully thought through, or perhaps trying to exert some kind of control in a situation where he has almost none.
That's a really good point about control. Hadn't thought of that. He also says something like he feels every call might be their last one.
Which just ramps up the tension, doesn't it? That feeling of uncertainty hanging over everything.
And K.A.'s response is just simple. She just wishes she could hug him.
That really brings home the physical separation, the human cost of it all, just wanting that basic connection.
Yeah. And later in that same call, Ari says, he'll handle himself. He's a man, but his worry is all for K.A.
So his focus is clearly on her well-being, even then.
Seems like it. He asks her to tell everyone he loves them. And there's a quick mention, too, about getting an attorney soon.
Okay, so the legal side is definitely in the background. He's aware of that context, which it makes some of the things he says later even more puzzling.
Then he drops this line, "Nobody loves me anymore." It sounds so desolate.
Oh, wow.
But K.A., she jumps right in, denies it immediately.
What?
But then R.A. says, "I know what you told me and I believe you." Which makes you wonder, right? What did she tell him before? In a conversation we don't have a record of.
Right. Some prior reassurance, clearly.
And he circles back to that first offer. Tell them to bring me to you. I'll say whatever they want. He repeats it. It's obviously weighing on him.
That repetition, it could be guilt, couldn't it? Or this feeling he's responsible for her distress somehow and wants to fix it, even by sacrificing herself. It sounds like a real internal battle.
Yeah, definitely feels like a struggle. He's worried about her, tells her to lean on her family. But when he asks if she went back to work, she says, they don't want me there.
They don't want her there, meaning the workplace.
Yeah, she clarifies, they're afraid for me.
Yeah.
And R.A. just says he understands. Like, no further explanation needed.
The ripple effects clearly spreading out.
The call ends. It's pretty bleak. He says, I fucked up for you. I just love you so much, babe. Says he won't keep calling. Wishes he could see her one more time. And then see you in the next lifetime.
Oof. Next lifetime. That's heavy. It suggests such a deep pessimism about everything, a real sense of finality.
Okay, let's shift gears. The second call. This is April 2nd, 2023, and now he's talking to J.A.
Okay, different person. Does the tone change?
Yeah, it feels different. Less immediately intense, maybe. He mentions he'd been trying to call Kathy, that's K.A., but the phone system was acting up. Said he got cut off on Friday.
Practical issues.
Right. And he mentions bad storms, tornadoes even, hitting Indiana. So maybe that was affecting things. Says he didn't sleep well. It's more like logistical chat at first.
That makes sense. A different relationship dynamic with J.A., perhaps. Less focused on that immediate, raw, emotional need we heard with K.A., and more about just sharing updates, getting a different kind of support.
Could be. He asks J.A. to tell Kathy he's okay. Just simple reassurance. Then he asks J.A. if she's going to church and where.
Okay.
J.A. explains she's going to this place called Story Church at the, looks like Rock Theater in Peru. Says she started going after wrecking her van the previous February, felt like she needed to reconnect with God.
Interesting. And what's R.A.'s reaction?
This is where it gets really interesting. R.A. says he's accepted the Lord Jesus Christ as my savior.
Oh, wow. That's a major shift from the tone of that first call.
Definitely. He sounds genuinely pleased that Jay's going to church, and he mentions Kathy's faith, too.
So this newfound faith, it seems like maybe it's offering him some comfort, some way to cope, maybe find meaning in that situation, and connecting with Jay and Kathy over it.
Yeah, it seems that way. He ends the call saying his family always loves him. He's relying on God now. Believes they'll all be together again, either soon or in heaven. He mentions Kathy sent him a Bible. Says he accepted God back in March 2023. And there's this funny little detail where he's confused because the Bible doesn't say Holy Bible on the front. It's called the Message.
Ah, the paraphrase version.
Right. Apparently, Dr. Frank gave it to Kathy.
Yeah.
R.A. wants J.A. to tell Kathy to thank Dr. Frank for, quote, saving my life.
Oh.
Even asks if Dr. Frank could give her another Bible.
Saving my life. That's strong language. It shows how significant this spiritual turn feels to him. And the detail about the message shows he's actually, looking at it, engaging with it. Quite a contrast to the despair in call one.
Totally. The call ends with him saying his lawyers are trying to get him a Bible too, and that he'll try calling Kathy again. Which brings us to the third call, April 3rd, 2023. Back to K.A. and this. This is where things take a massive turn. It's jarring.
How so?
He starts off apologizing right away. K.A. asks, what's going on, sweetheart? And then he just says it. I did it.
He says that I did it. About what?
He clarifies. I killed Abby. I killed Abby&Libby.
Whoa. Okay, that's blunt. After everything we just heard about his faith journey, what's K.A.'s reaction?
Immediate denial. Just, no, you didn't, dear. Over and over. But R.A. insists, yes, I did. Then adds, I don't know why.
Doesn't know why? That's chilling. So he confesses but claims no motive or understanding.
Apparently, K.A. immediately pivots. Is he sick? Are his meds messed up? Is something else wrong? She's looking for any other explanation.
That's a critical moment, isn't it? His direct confession followed by that lack of explanation and her instant refusal to accept it. Her mind immediately goes to external factors, illness, medication, manipulation. It says so much about how she sees him.
Yeah, she really hammers that point, keeps asking why he'd say that.
Yeah.
Says, they're screwing with you, they're messing with your mind.
So she thinks it's coercion or manipulation by the facility?
Seems to be her immediate theory. She mentions his dad called her, so the family's obviously talking, worried. She suggests maybe it's his food or even something wrong with his neck.
Yeah.
She's adamant.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you ever say you did anything, because I know you didn't.
That level of certainty, even facing a confession, it could be a defense mechanism, right? Protecting herself from something unbearable. But it also shows how strong her belief in his innocence is.
Absolutely. But R.A. pushes back. Sort of. He keeps saying, I think I did. It's maybe less forceful than, yes, I did, but he's still saying it.
I think I did. That qualifier is interesting, too.
Kay just repeats, they are trying to get you to say things. They're trying to mess with your mind. Then R.A. says something really odd. I'd be safer, I guess.
Safer? Safer how? What does that mean?
K.A. shuts that down immediately. The call ends with R.A. wishing they'd just kill him or let him apologize to the families. Kay's clearly distressed, telling him to stop talking, saying she needs to call someone there.
That safer comment is deeply concerning. It could suggest just utter despair, wanting an escape, any escape. And K.A.'s reaction, wanting to stop the call, contact someone. It shows the sheer panic his words induced.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. Fourth call, May 10th, 2023. And look at the time, 5:03 a.m. Very early.
5 a.m. Okay. That's unusual.
Kay starts, mentions meeting Brad, one of the lawyers, and wonders if R.A. is going to be moved. Then R.A. says, I think maybe I'm losing my mind, but I'm not sure.
Again with the mental state concerns. And at 5 a.m. that suggests maybe a sleepless night, agitation.
Could be. K.A. tries to reassure him. Then he says, great, this is the part where it gets weird. Asks K.A., are you okay? Then repeats he thinks he's losing his mind.
This is the part where it gets weird. It's like he's anticipating his own instability or knows what he's about to say is going to sound strange.
Maybe. He asks if he can trust Brad and Andy, the lawyers. K.A. confirms, yes, they're their lawyers. But R.A. says he needs to tell her something anyway. K.A. actually warns him, asks if he's sure he wants to talk about it on the phone.
Smart question.
But he goes ahead, says it again. I need you to know that I did this.
And K.A.'s reaction, still denial.
Oh, yeah, immediate, forceful. What? No. No, you didn't, dear. There's no way. There's no way.
Wow. Consistent.
Then he asks her, do you still love me?
Right after confessing again, he needs that reassurance. That's telling. Fear of abandonment, maybe?
Seems likely. K.A. says yes, she loves him, but she still denies he did anything.
The pattern holds. Confession, denial, plea for love.
The call wraps up with R.A. saying it's the first time he's really been able to talk to her in a while. But then, I'm definitely going to lose my mind now, though. Mentions his request for a personal visit didn't go through.
So that isolation is probably adding to the pressure cooker feeling.
Seems like it. He says he's trying to find peace, had a dream where he needed to let her go. But then, one more time. But I have to let you know that I did it, hon. And K.A. denies it again.
That recurring need to confess to her specifically. Even though she rejects it every time, it's like this internal compulsion he can't shake. He feels he has to say it, regardless of her reaction.
Okay, now, call number 5. Same day, May 10th, but later in the morning, 11:13 a.m., not much time has passed.
Right after the 5 a.m. call.
It jumps right back in. Do you still love me? And will everyone else love him? Because he says he might have to spend the rest of his life there.
The anxiety is still sky high, clearly. Fixated on lifelong imprisonment now.
K.A. pleads with him, stop talking about it, insists it's not true. But R.A. keeps needing that reassurance, saying he might only see her one last time.
That focus on finality again, it really underscores the weight of the situation as he sees it.
He insists it's true. K.A. insists you're not well. Then R.A. brings up the electric chair, or the death penalty, asks if she'll be there for him.
Oh, wow. He actually said death penalty. That raises the stakes incredibly high, shows the extent of his fears.
Yeah. K.A. sounds really distressed now. This isn't right. They messed you up so bad. But R.A. just keeps saying, it's okay, honey. I did it. I did it, dear.
So K.A. is doubling down on the external forces explanation. She's convinced someone or something has messed him up. She can't accept the words are truly his.
Seems that way. The call ends with R.A. saying, I knew I was supposed to let you go. I was trying to let you go. Hope she'll always love him. K.A. starts asking, who's with you? Is your lawyer there? Stop talking if he's not there.
So now she's worried about the legal implications of him talking like this, who might be listening. Practical fear kicking in alongside the emotional distress.
Right. And the very last thing is R.A. repeating, I killed Abby&Libby, dear, and K.A. just desperately pleading, stop.
Just heartbreaking. The communication breakdown is almost total by this point. His resignation, her panic, it's incredibly difficult to even read.
Okay, let's move to call 6, May 17th, 2023. This one's back to J.A.
Okay. A different dynamic again.
Yeah, and J.A. starts by setting a boundary. Says they won't discuss this. Clearly means the confessions.
Smart move, maybe. Trying to contain it.
R.A. asks her, did Kathy tell you I did it? J.A. just reassures him they love him no matter what, asks if Kathy's okay. R.A. worries they won't love him because he said it.
But J.A. pushes back.
Yeah, she says she knows he's not in a good place, but they still love him. They're praying for him. And crucially, she says, saying it doesn't mean you did it.
So J.A. is also offering an alternative explanation. It's his mental state, his distress, making him say things, not necessarily the truth, consistent support, but framed differently than K.A.'s immediate, they're messing with you.
Right, but R.A. insists, it does mean I did it, because I did. J.A. says she thinks they're messing with him. R.A. denies that.
He denies being manipulated. Interesting.
Yeah, then he just says, I love you, though. J says it back, says she knows he doesn't have it in him. R.A. gets firm again. I wouldn't say it if it weren't true.
Wow, that's a direct contradiction. He insists it's true. She insists it's impossible based on his character.
J.A. throws out the idea maybe his meds are messed up. And repeats, firmly, they won't discuss the case anymore.
Setting that boundary again. Trying to protect him, maybe.
Ooh.
Or just unable to process his words.
Could be both. The call ends with R.A. asking point blank, you won't love me if I did do it.
Oh, God. Testing her.
But J.A. gives him total reassurance, unwavering love no matter what.
That's powerful, even faced with that hypothetical.
Yeah. R.A. then asks if he'll be allowed to call again. Mentions he's not really getting mail anymore, even though J.A. says she writes every day.
Communication issues again, adding to the isolation, probably.
He says he shared this stuff with his therapist, who he claims he sees every day, then says goodbye, tells J.A. to tell everyone he loves them.
The mention of daily therapy is interesting context, but J.A.'s absolute assurance of love despite everything, that's the main takeaway there. That bond is strong.
Okay, call number 7, June 5th, 2023. Back with K.A.
All right.
This one starts almost normally. K.A. offers to put money on his books, for coffee, snacks, a little practical gesture.
Like trying to inject some normalcy, a small comfort.
Seems like it. R.A. hesitates, worries about spending money if they don't know where it came from, but K.A. just brushes it off. She even talks about her own messy desk for a second. Just mundane stuff.
A deliberate attempt to shift the tone, maybe, after those last few intense calls.
Perhaps. They talk about his breakfast briefly. Then R.A. says, it's weird talking to you. Says he feels like he's lost my mind, gone to hell or something.
Back to the mental state. And K.A.
She agrees, sort of somberly, about his situation being hellish. But then R.A. slips it in again, almost casually. You know that I'd done it right.
Wow. Just drops it in there.
And K.A. immediately tries to deflect. I want to have a good conversation. Change the subject.
Still consistent. He persists, she deflects. The pattern is locked in.
The call ends with R.A. saying he's in a really frustrating spot, but admits K.A.'s situation is probably worse. He feels like nobody's being honest with them, like they're scared to hurt his feelings.
That's insightful, his perception that people are walking on eggshells around him.
K.A. kind of agrees, saying people do have to be careful what they say. She mentions she tried to get a chaplain to visit him, but it didn't work out.
Institutional barriers, maybe?
R.A. says a chaplain didn't help him in the past anyway. K.A. suggests just praying privately. Then R.A. says something really dark. Feels like the demons have already got him. Like he is in hell.
Deep despair there.
K.A. tries to make a distinction, between his physical situation and his spiritual state, hoping he gets it. The very last thing is R.A. asking about that Bible again, the one Kathy sent, the message. Because now he has another one that does say Holy Bible. Still puzzling over that detail.
That little detail about the Bibles. It's almost poignant amidst all the darkness, still seeking clarity, understanding, even on small things, but that feeling of being in hell, that's a bleak place to be.
Yeah. Which brings us to the final call we have, number 8, June 11th, 2023. Again with KA.
Okay, the last one in this set.
It leads right with it. No preamble. I did it. Do you still love me?
Just straight in, same pattern.
Yep. KA says yes, she loves him, but no, he didn't do it. RA says he doesn't want to upset her. KA replies, sounding exhausted, I'm already upset. He repeats again that he feels like he's lost his mind.
The cycle continues. Confession, plea for love, denial, expression of mental distress. It's like they're stuck in this loop.
KA finally says, you can't call and talk like this, you're killing me.
Setting a hard boundary now. The toll is becoming too much for her.
Ari apologizes, then asks her worriedly if she's going to harm herself.
Oh, projecting his own despair onto her perhaps, or genuine concern?
Hard to say. She says no. RA says again he feels like he's in hell. Mentions he's still waiting for that other Bible from her. They both kind of admit they don't understand what's going on.
Shared confusion, at least.
RA says he'll have to stop calling then, apologizes again. K's final line is firm. You can't call me if you're going to talk like that.
The boundary is set.
And RA just asks, I'm going to talk like what? And then the call cuts off.
Wow, that final question. Talk like what? It suggests maybe he genuinely doesn't grasp the impact his words are having. Or maybe he feels compelled to say it, regardless of the impact. Either way, the communication has completely broken down. What an ending.
So, yeah, that's the journey through these 8 calls. It's a lot. Incredibly complex, deeply emotional stuff we've just heard excerpts from.
Absolutely. You have RA's repeated confessions, stark and sometimes confusing. And then you have KA and JA just consistently denying it, showering him with love and support, trying to find other explanations.
It's this constant push and pull. Fear, love, desperation, confusion. It's all swirling around in these short conversations.
So for everyone listening, it's worth thinking about those conflicting stories. Why might RA be saying these things? Is it guilt, distress, manipulation, something else entirely?
And what about KA and JA? What does their unwavering belief in him, their constant support, tell us about their relationships, their perceptions?
Right. And don't forget the context. He's incarcerated, isolated. There were storms affecting communication at one point. How do all those external pressures feed into these conversations?
It really makes you think about belief, denial, how people cope when facing something truly awful.
Definitely. And these calls, they naturally leave us with so many questions unanswered, don't they? What exactly was happening legally at these specific times? What information did RA have access to?
And of course, what happened after June 11th? These calls are just a snapshot, a really intense one, but still just a glimpse.
It's a glimpse into profound human struggle, the complexities of truth, perception, mental state. It's all tangled together here.
So maybe a final thought to leave people with. In situations like this, with so much uncertainty, so many conflicting statements, what's the role, of loyalty? Does it clarify things, or can it sometimes obscure them?
That's a heavy question. These calls give us such a raw, intimate look at people grappling with the unimaginable. It really forces you to think about human connection, its strength, and maybe even its limits when things fall apart.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking into something pretty intense. It's a set of recorded phone calls.
That's right. They're labeled State Exhibit 313.
And these calls, they're between R.A., who's an inmate at the Westville Correctional Facility in Indiana, and 2 other people, K.A. and J.A.
We've got transcripts for 8 calls here, spanning from, let's see, November 2022 through June 2023.
So our job today really is to unpack these calls, try to figure out the key information, but also, the emotional landscape. It feels pretty heavy.
It really does. And it's a raw look, isn't it? Unfiltered conversations under just immense pressure. You hear the emotion right away.
Yeah. Yes.
And sometimes the way they talk is, it's cryptic. Yeah. You have to listen really closely, not just what they say, but maybe what's underneath.
Okay, so let's jump into that first call, November 14th, 2022. This is R.A. talking to K.A. And yeah, that's emotional intensity you mentioned. It's right there from the start.
They keep saying he doesn't want to upset her.
Right. Tells her he loves her repeatedly. But then there's this offer he makes. It's kind of strange.
What does he say exactly?
He says, basically, if things get too much for K.A., she should tell the investigators to bring him to her. And then he'll say, quote, whatever they want.
Wow. Whatever they want. That's broad. And pretty cryptic, like you said. What could that even mean?
Exactly. Is he trying to protect her? Like, take the fall? even if it's not true.
Or maybe it's just the sheer stress getting to him, saying things that aren't fully thought through, or perhaps trying to exert some kind of control in a situation where he has almost none.
That's a really good point about control. Hadn't thought of that. He also says something like he feels every call might be their last one.
Which just ramps up the tension, doesn't it? That feeling of uncertainty hanging over everything.
And K.A.'s response is just simple. She just wishes she could hug him.
That really brings home the physical separation, the human cost of it all, just wanting that basic connection.
Yeah. And later in that same call, Ari says, he'll handle himself. He's a man, but his worry is all for K.A.
So his focus is clearly on her well-being, even then.
Seems like it. He asks her to tell everyone he loves them. And there's a quick mention, too, about getting an attorney soon.
Okay, so the legal side is definitely in the background. He's aware of that context, which it makes some of the things he says later even more puzzling.
Then he drops this line, "Nobody loves me anymore." It sounds so desolate.
Oh, wow.
But K.A., she jumps right in, denies it immediately.
What?
But then R.A. says, "I know what you told me and I believe you." Which makes you wonder, right? What did she tell him before? In a conversation we don't have a record of.
Right. Some prior reassurance, clearly.
And he circles back to that first offer. Tell them to bring me to you. I'll say whatever they want. He repeats it. It's obviously weighing on him.
That repetition, it could be guilt, couldn't it? Or this feeling he's responsible for her distress somehow and wants to fix it, even by sacrificing herself. It sounds like a real internal battle.
Yeah, definitely feels like a struggle. He's worried about her, tells her to lean on her family. But when he asks if she went back to work, she says, they don't want me there.
They don't want her there, meaning the workplace.
Yeah, she clarifies, they're afraid for me.
Yeah.
And R.A. just says he understands. Like, no further explanation needed.
The ripple effects clearly spreading out.
The call ends. It's pretty bleak. He says, I fucked up for you. I just love you so much, babe. Says he won't keep calling. Wishes he could see her one more time. And then see you in the next lifetime.
Oof. Next lifetime. That's heavy. It suggests such a deep pessimism about everything, a real sense of finality.
Okay, let's shift gears. The second call. This is April 2nd, 2023, and now he's talking to J.A.
Okay, different person. Does the tone change?
Yeah, it feels different. Less immediately intense, maybe. He mentions he'd been trying to call Kathy, that's K.A., but the phone system was acting up. Said he got cut off on Friday.
Practical issues.
Right. And he mentions bad storms, tornadoes even, hitting Indiana. So maybe that was affecting things. Says he didn't sleep well. It's more like logistical chat at first.
That makes sense. A different relationship dynamic with J.A., perhaps. Less focused on that immediate, raw, emotional need we heard with K.A., and more about just sharing updates, getting a different kind of support.
Could be. He asks J.A. to tell Kathy he's okay. Just simple reassurance. Then he asks J.A. if she's going to church and where.
Okay.
J.A. explains she's going to this place called Story Church at the, looks like Rock Theater in Peru. Says she started going after wrecking her van the previous February, felt like she needed to reconnect with God.
Interesting. And what's R.A.'s reaction?
This is where it gets really interesting. R.A. says he's accepted the Lord Jesus Christ as my Savior.
Oh, wow. That's a major shift from the tone of that first call.
Definitely. He sounds genuinely pleased that Jay's going to church, and he mentions Kathy's faith, too.
So this newfound faith, it seems like maybe it's offering him some comfort, some way to cope, maybe find meaning in that situation, and connecting with Jay and Kathy over it.
Yeah, it seems that way. He ends the call saying his family always loves him. He's relying on God now. Believes they'll all be together again, either soon or in heaven. He mentions Kathy sent him a Bible. Says he accepted God back in March 2023. And there's this funny little detail where he's confused because the Bible doesn't say Holy Bible on the front. It's called the Message.
The paraphrase version.
Right. Apparently, Dr. Frank gave it to Kathy.
Yeah.
R.A. wants J.A. to tell Kathy to thank Dr. Frank for, quote, saving my life.
Oh.
Even asks if Dr. Frank could give her another Bible.
Saving my life. That's strong language. It shows how significant this spiritual turn feels to him. And the detail about the message shows he's actually, looking at it, engaging with it. Quite a contrast to the despair in call one.
Totally. The call ends with him saying his lawyers are trying to get him a Bible too, and that he'll try calling Kathy again. Which brings us to the third call, April 3rd, 2023. Back to K.A. and this. This is where things take a massive turn. It's jarring.
How so?
He starts off apologizing right away. K.A. asks, what's going on, sweetheart? And then He just says it. I did
He
it.
says, I did it. About what?
He clarifies. I killed Abby. I killed Abby&Libby.
Whoa. Okay, that's blunt. After everything we just heard about his faith journey, what's KA's reaction?
Immediate denial. Just, no, you didn't, dear. Over and over. But RA insists, yes, I did. Then adds, I don't know why.
Doesn't know why? That's chilling. So he confesses but claims no motive or understanding.
Apparently, KA immediately pivots. Is he sick? Are his meds messed up? Is something else wrong? She's looking for any other explanation.
That's a critical moment, isn't it? His direct confession followed by that lack of explanation and her instant refusal to accept it. Her mind immediately goes to external factors, illness, medication, manipulation. It says so much about how she sees him.
Yeah, she really hammers that point, keeps asking why he'd say that.
Yeah.
Says, they're screwing with you, they're messing with your mind.
So she thinks it's coercion or manipulation by the facility?
Seems to be her immediate theory. She mentions his dad called her, so the family's obviously talking, worried. She suggests maybe it's his food or even something wrong with his neck.
Yeah.
She's adamant. Don't you ever say you did anything, because I know you didn't.
That level of certainty, even facing a confession, it could be a defense mechanism, right? Protecting herself from something unbearable. But it also shows how strong her belief in his innocence is.
Absolutely. But RA pushes back. Sort of. He keeps saying, I think I did. It's maybe less forceful than, yes, I did, but he's still saying it.
I think I did. That qualifier is interesting, too.
Kay just repeats, they are trying to get you to say things. They're trying to mess with your mind. Then RA says something really odd. I'd be safer, I guess.
Safer. Safer how? What does that mean?
KA shuts that down immediately. The call ends with RA wishing they'd just kill him or let him apologize to the families. KA's clearly distressed, telling him to stop talking, saying she needs to call someone there.
That safer comment is deeply concerning. It could suggest just utter despair, wanting an escape, any escape, and KA's reaction, wanting to stop the call, contact someone. It shows the sheer panic his words induced.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. Fourth call, May 10th, 2023. And look at the time, 5:03 a.m. Very early.
5 a.m. Okay. That's unusual.
Kay starts, mentions meeting Brad, one of the lawyers, and wonders if RA is going to be moved. Then RA says, I think maybe I'm losing my mind, but I'm not sure.
Again with the mental state concerns. And at 5 a.m. that suggests maybe a sleepless night, agitation.
Could be. KA tries to reassure him. Then he says, great, this is the part where it gets weird. Asks KA, are you okay? Then repeats he thinks he's losing his mind.
This is the part where it gets weird. It's like he's anticipating his own instability or knows what he's about to say is going to sound strange.
Maybe. He asks if he can trust Brad and Andy, the lawyers. KA confirms, yes, they're their lawyers. But RA says he needs to tell her something anyway. KA actually warns him, asks if he's sure he wants to talk about it on the phone.
Smart question.
But he goes ahead, says it again, I need you to know that I did this.
And KA's reaction, still denial.
Oh yeah, immediate, forceful. What? No, you didn't, dear. There's no way. There's no way.
Wow, consistent.
Then he asks her, do you still love me?
Right after confessing again, he needs that reassurance. That's telling. Fear of abandonment, maybe?
Seems likely. KA says yes, she loves him, but she still denies he did anything.
The pattern holds. Confession, denial, plea for love.
The call wraps up with RA saying it's the first time he's really been able to talk to her in a while. But then, I'm definitely going to lose my mind now, though. Mentions his request for a personal visit didn't go through.
So that isolation is probably adding to the pressure cooker feeling.
Seems like it. He says he's trying to find peace, had a dream where he needed to let her go. But then, one more time. But I have to let you know that I did it, hon. And KA denies it again.
That recurring need to confess to her specifically. Even though she rejects it every time, it's like this internal compulsion he can't shake. He feels he has to say it, regardless of her reaction.
Okay, now, call number 5. Same day, May 10th, but later in the morning, 11:13 a.m., not much time has passed.
Right after the 5 a.m. call.
It jumps right back in. Do you still love me? And will everyone else love him? Because he says he might have to spend the rest of his life there.
The anxiety is still sky high, clearly. Fixated on lifelong imprisonment now.
KA pleads with him, stop talking about it, insists it's not true. But RA keeps needing that reassurance, saying he might only see her one last time.
That focus on finality again, it really underscores the weight of the situation as he sees it.
He insists it's true. KA insists you're not well. Then RA brings up the electric chair, or the death penalty, asks if she'll be there for him.
Oh, wow. He actually said death penalty. That raises the stakes incredibly high, shows the extent of his fears.
Yeah. KA sounds really distressed now. This isn't right. They messed you up so bad. But RA just keeps saying, "It's okay, honey. I did it. I did it, dear."
So KA is doubling down on the external forces explanation. She's convinced someone or something has messed him up. She can't accept the words are truly his.
Seems that way. The call ends with RA saying, "I knew I was supposed to let you go. I was trying to let you go. Hope she'll always love him." KA starts asking, "Who's with you? Is your lawyer there? Stop talking if he's not there."
So now she's worried about the legal implications of him talking like this, who might be listening. Practical fear kicking in alongside the emotional distress.
Right. And the very last thing is RA repeating, "I killed Abby&Libby, dear," and KA just desperately pleading, "Stop."
Just heartbreaking. The communication breakdown is almost total by this point. His resignation, her panic, it's incredibly difficult to even read.
Okay, let's move to call 6, May 17th, 2023. This one's back to JA.
Okay. A different dynamic again.
Yeah, and JA starts by setting a boundary. Says they won't discuss this. Clearly means the confessions.
Smart move, maybe. Trying to contain it.
RA asks her, "Did Kathy tell you I did it?" JA just reassures him they love him no matter what, asks if Kathy's okay. RA worries they won't love him because he said it.
But Jay pushes back.
Yeah, she says she knows he's not in a good place, but they still love him. They're praying for him. And crucially, she says, saying it doesn't mean you did it.
So Jay is also offering an alternative explanation. It's his mental state, his distress, making him say things, not necessarily the truth, consistent support, but framed differently than KA's immediate, "they're messing with you."
Right, but RA insists, "It does mean I did it, because I did." JA says she thinks they're messing with him. RA denies that.
He denies being manipulated. Interesting.
Yeah, then he just says, "I love you, though." Jay says it back, says she knows he doesn't have it in him. RA gets firm again. "I wouldn't say it if it weren't true."
Wow, that's a direct contradiction. He insists it's true. She insists it's impossible based on his character.
JA throws out the idea maybe his meds are messed up and repeats firmly they won't discuss the case anymore.
Setting that boundary again. Trying to protect him, maybe.
Ooh.
Or just unable to process his words.
Could be both. The call ends with RA asking point blank, "You won't love me if I did do it."
Oh, God. Testing her.
But JA gives him total reassurance, unwavering love no matter what.
That's powerful, even faced with that hypothetical.
Yeah. RA then asks if he'll be allowed to call again. Mentions he's not really getting mail anymore, even though JA says she writes every day.
Communication issues again, adding to the isolation, probably.
He says he shared this stuff with his therapist, who he claims he sees every day, then says goodbye, tells JA to tell everyone he loves them.
The mention of daily therapy is interesting context, but JA's absolute assurance of love despite everything, that's the main takeaway there. That bond is strong.
Okay, call number 7, June 5th, 2023. Back with KA.
All right?
This one starts almost normally. KA offers to put money on his books, for coffee, snacks, a little practical gesture.
Like trying to inject some normalcy, a small comfort.
Seems like it. RA hesitates, worries about spending money if they don't know where it came from, but KA just brushes it off. She even talks about her own messy desk for a second. Just mundane stuff.
A deliberate attempt to shift the tone, maybe, after those last few intense calls.
Perhaps. They talk about his breakfast briefly. Then RA says, "It's weird talking to you." Says he feels like he's lost my mind, gone to hell or something.
Back to the mental state. And KA.
She agrees, sort of somberly, about his situation being hellish. But then RA slips it in again, almost casually. "You know that I'd done it right."
Wow. Just drops it in there.
And KA immediately tries to deflect. "I want to have a good conversation." Change the subject.
Still consistent. He persists, she deflects. The pattern is locked in.
The call ends with RA saying he's in a really frustrating spot, but admits KA's situation is probably worse. He feels like nobody's being honest with them, like they're scared to hurt his feelings.
That's insightful, his perception that people are walking on eggshells around him.
KA kind of agrees, saying people do have to be careful what they say. She mentioned she tried to get a chaplain to visit him, but it didn't work out.
Institutional barriers, maybe?
RA says a chaplain didn't help him in the past anyway. KA suggests just praying privately. Then RA says something really dark, feels like the demons have already got him, like he is in hell.
Deep despair there.
KA tries to make a distinction, between his physical situation and his spiritual state, hoping he gets it. The very last thing is RA asking about that Bible again, the one Kathy sent, the message. Because now he has another one that does say Holy Bible. Still puzzling over that detail.
That little detail about the Bibles. It's almost poignant amidst all the darkness, still seeking clarity, understanding, even on small things, but that feeling of being in hell. That's a bleak place to be.
Yeah. Which brings us to the final call we have, number 8, June 11th, 2023. Again with KA.
Okay, the last one in this set.
It leads right with it. No preamble. I did it. Do you still love me?
Just straight in, same pattern.
Yep. KA says yes, she loves him, but no, he didn't do it. RA says he doesn't want to upset her. KA replies, sounding exhausted, I'm already upset. He repeats again that he feels like he's lost his mind.
The cycle continues. Confession, plea for love, denial, expression of mental distress. It's like they're stuck in this loop.
KA finally says, you can't call and talk like this, you're killing me.
Setting a hard boundary now. The toll is becoming too much for her.
Ari apologizes, then asks her worriedly if she's going to harm herself.
Oh, projecting his own despair onto her perhaps, or genuine concern?
Hard to say. She says no. RA says again he feels like he's in hell. Mentions he's still waiting for that other Bible from her. They both kind of admit they don't understand what's going on.
Shared confusion, at least.
RA says he'll have to stop calling then, apologizes again. K's final line is firm. You can't call me if you're going to talk like that.
The boundary is set.
And RA just asks, I'm going to talk like what? And then the call cuts off.
Wow, that final question. Talk like what? It suggests maybe he genuinely doesn't grasp the impact his words are having. Or maybe he feels compelled to say it, regardless of the impact. Either way, the communication has completely broken down. What an ending.
So, yeah, that's the journey through these 8 calls. It's a lot. Incredibly complex, deeply emotional stuff we've just heard excerpts from.
Absolutely. You have RA's repeated confessions, stark and sometimes confusing. And then you have KA and JA just consistently denying it, showering him with love and support, trying to find other explanations.
It's this constant push and pull. Fear, love, desperation, confusion. It's all swirling around in these short conversations.
So for everyone listening, it's worth thinking about those conflicting stories. Why might RA be saying these things? Is it guilt, distress, manipulation, something else entirely?
And what about KA and JA? What does their unwavering belief in him, their constant support, tell us about their relationships, their perceptions?
Right. And don't forget the context. He's incarcerated, isolated. There were storms affecting communication at one point. How do all those external pressures feed into these conversations?
It really makes you think about belief, denial, how people cope when facing something truly awful.
Definitely. And these calls, they naturally leave us with so many questions unanswered, don't they? What exactly was happening legally at these specific times? What information did RA have access to?
And of course, what happened after June 11th. These calls are just a snapshot, a really intense one, but still just a glimpse.
It's a glimpse into profound human struggle, the complexities of truth, perception, mental state. It's all tangled together here.
So maybe a final thought to leave people with. In situations like this, with so much uncertainty, so many conflicting statements, what's the role, of loyalty? Does it clarify things, or can it sometimes obscure them?
That's a heavy question. These calls give us such a raw, intimate look at people grappling with the unimaginable. It really forces you to think about human connection, its strength, and maybe even its limits when things fall apart. Okay, let's unpack this. You've given us a fascinating and, frankly, enormous collection of trial exhibits related to the Delphi case.
It's quite something, isn't it? A real mountain of information.
It really is. This is a real deep dive into the nuts and bolts, the physical evidence, the investigative steps, all laid out. Your goal, you mentioned, is to get a solid understanding of complex info quickly but thoroughly, and that's exactly what we're going to try and do here.
Right. Think of this as us, guiding you through it, pulling out the key threads.
Exactly. What immediately strikes me looking through this is just the sheer scale.
Absolutely. It's a testament to the intensity and breadth of the investigation, for sure.
We're looking at what seems to be a spreadsheet, right? A log of exhibits entered day by day during a trial.
Yeah, a chronological record. And even without the full courtroom context, it provides some incredibly revealing threads about how things unfolded.
Right, because we see everything from initial scene photos and videos,
Yeah.
all the way to later forensic lab reports on items they collected.
And it's important to keep in mind, each entry here represents just one piece. In a trial, each item gets scrutinized.
Yeah.
Authenticity, relevance, the story it tells.
Sure. But for our purposes, just seeing the list, the sheer variety of things documented, it gives you a real tangible sense of how wide-ranging this investigation became.
It certainly suggests they were methodical. exhaustive, really, pursuing lots of different leads, documenting findings across, well, all sorts of evidence categories.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Day 1, according to this log, right away we see, a Snapchat photo. Abby and Libby in the car. Seems like they were on their way to the trail.
That's, yeah, a poignant detail, like you said, sets the human context immediately.
Definitely. And beyond that, the initial focus seems very much on the location itself. Overview photos, zoomed-in shots of the Monon High Bridge.
Drone footage, too, of an entrance. And a digital map.
Right, highlighting key spots like the Hoosier Heartland Highway, the CPS building. It looks like the first hours were really about sort of establishing the scene.
Which makes sense. That's step one, always. You need a clear picture of the environment. Where did this happen?
So the maps, the drone shots, they give that spatial context, layout, access points.
Exactly. Potential routes in and out, how different locations relate to each other. And that Snapchat photo, while emotional, it's also an early point in the timeline, potentially offers clues.
Okay, moving to day 2 then. We see more drone footage.
And aerial maps this time, showing Deer Creek, the bridge, nearby property.
There's also a photo mentioned from the Weber's side of the creek, and a 9-minute drone video of the Delphi trails, plus drawings of trail maps.
Yeah, they were clearly building a very detailed visual record of the whole area.
Why is that level of visual documentation so important here?
Well, visual evidence is incredibly powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
It lets investigators and later a jury almost be there.
Right.
The multiple drone flights, the different map types, aerial, trail specific, they provide layers of understanding. You see potential sightlines, how tough the terrain is.
Possible entry and exit routes, too.
For sure. And it helps understand witness perspectives. That photo from the Weber side might establish a specific vantage point, maybe relevant to testimony or other evidence.
Got it. Now, day 3. This is where the entries seem to really zero in on the immediate aftermath.
Yes, the focus definitely shifts here.
We see mentions of photos of Libby's shirt and her shoe in the muddy water of Deer Creek.
Then descriptions of photos showing the ground with the disturbance in the leaves, is how it's put.
And photos detailing the line of sight for where the shirt and shoe were found. And importantly, sealed aerial photos, reportedly showing the victims in the woods, the scene itself.
And also sealed close-ups. Abby's neck injury, blood under Libby's body.
Plus a digital diagram showing where the bodies were located with topography. This really highlights that move towards meticulous forensic documentation, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's a critical transition. The broad documentation gives way to a very specific focus on the immediate surroundings of the victims.
And any evidence left behind.
Precisely. The disturbance in the leaves, where clothing was found, tiny details maybe, but potentially vital for reconstructing the sequence of events.
And the sealed photos, just indicating sensitivity.
Highly sensitive, potentially graphic evidence. Standard procedure to seal them.
And notably, day 3 also includes the entry for sexual assault kits, collected for both Abby and Libby.
Right. A standard, though obviously deeply upsetting, procedure in cases like this, aimed at preserving any potential biological evidence, DNA, related to a possible assault.
Okay, day 4. This brings in lab reports, detailing specific items found in Deer Creek.
Quite a list here.
Yeah. A black and white Nike, size 10. Hollister jeans, waist 26, length 33. A tie-dye t-shirt, gray, no boundaries hoodie, medium.
Underwear, socks, black and purple, pink, a greenhead scarf, black camisole.
And separately, Converse tennis shoes, both right and left. And then what's listed as a .4 Erie caliber Smith & Wesson cartridge.
Wow, okay.
The sheer volume of clothing found in the creek is striking. What could be the significance there?
Well, it immediately raises questions, doesn't it? Were these items discarded voluntarily? Forcibly removed?
Right.
The specific brands, sizes, the condition torn, muddy, wet, could offer clues about the victims, the circumstances.
Comparing sizes to what the girls usually wore, perhaps?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that .4 caliber cartridge, that's potentially crucial physical evidence. Casings can often be linked to a specific firearm through ballistics.
We'll definitely come back to that. The entries continue with strands of material taken from between Abby's fingers and from her arm.
Swabs, too. From Libby's wrists, other areas.
Also a swab of a blood stain found on a tree, and a lab report about black Nike shoes found under Abby's body.
Interesting. Under her body.
Yeah. And several other swabs from the ground nearby and from what's called an F tree. Seems like a heavy focus on collecting trace evidence.
That's exactly what it is. Trace evidence refers to small bits of material fibers, hair, skin cells, DNA things that can transfer between people, objects, locations during a crime.
So the stuff from under Abby's fingernails, Could that hold DNA from an assailant if she struggled?
That's the hope, yes. Swabs from the victims, from objects like that blood stain on the tree, the F tree, they're all aimed at recovering any biological material that might link someone to the crime.
And the Nikes under Abby.
Significant. Were they hers? Someone else's? That's what trace evidence analysis tries to answer.
Okay, then more swabs. Red stains mentioned from the ground and that F tree again. Swabs from Libby's fingers. An iPhone found under Abby's body. And notably, a swab was taken from it before processing.
Ah, smart move.
Why do that first?
Well, the phone's potentially a gold mine of digital info, right?
Right.
But it's also fragile for biological material. Swabbing it before handling it for prints or data extraction is crucial to preserve any potential DNA on the surfaces. Touch DNA, things like that.
Makes sense. More swabs listed from Libby's thighs, breasts, trace fiber from Abby's arm, and then this, a black hooded Delphi swim sweatshirt, size 2XL, and blue jeans, size XL, both with red stains collected for drying.
Discuss preserving potential biological evidence, likely blood. The sizes are interesting too, 2XL and XL.
Yeah. And there's a note about an autopsy photo showing a pink sleeveless shirt, also with red stains, and an observation about it being damp. Maybe linking clothing condition to the timeline.
Could be. Dampness might suggest how long it was exposed or if it was in the creek, that sort of thing. All part of building that timeline.
Okay, the spreadsheet then seems to shift gears a bit. Mapping and digital evidence. A Google Earth illustration of the bridge pops up.
Right, and then a series relating to extracting data from Libby's phone.
Yeah, a timeline of activity, the original database report, maybe even battery level info.
Could be relevant, yeah.
Numerous photos of the phone itself are listed, showing its settings, Liberty's iPhone, her iCloud account visible, confirmation Find My iPhone was enabled.
All standard documentation for digital evidence.
And then, crucially, the raw video, taken by Libby on the bridge, initially listed as 30 seconds, later corrected to the full 43 seconds.
That video became absolutely critical, didn't it?
Seems like it. Along with screenshots showing a man behind Abby in that video, this video, and whoever that is, clearly central.
Undeniably. It provided visual and auditory documentation right from the scene,
Oh.
including the image of the person who became known as Bridge Guy.
And the data extraction, the timeline of her activity, communication logs, maybe battery level suggesting last use, all helps reconstruct events, right?
Absolutely. And Find My iPhone being on might have helped in the initial search efforts.
We also see audio evidence documented, a 43-second clip described as down the hill, apparently enhanced.
Audio enhancement tries to clarify faint sounds, voices, maybe make something intelligible.
And still frames extracted from Libby's video, both original and modified, including something called a still frame of interpolated Bridge Guy. What's interpolated?
Interpolation. It likely means using computer algorithms to analyze the pixels in the blurry image. Basically trying to generate a sharper, more detailed picture of his features, trying to clarify the image for identification.
Okay. The timeline seems to be explored further, too. Copies of Snapchat photos taken by other people at the bridge earlier that day.
Fitbit data mentioned, too, and still frames from HHS video footage showing various cars passing at different times.
Yeah, it looks like they were trying to piece together a really precise sequence. Who was in the area and exactly when.
The central work. Those other Snapchats could corroborate Abby and Libby's timing, maybe identify other people there. Fitbit data, if Libby wore one, might show her movements.
And the traffic cam footage.
Analyzing traffic patterns can help identify potential witnesses, or maybe rule out certain vehicles that weren't there at key times.
Okay, moving further through these exhibits. Mentions of autopsy photos, sealed. Diagrams of the crime scene. Close-up autopsy photos of injuries, also sealed.
Standard documentation, again sealed, due to the sensitive graphic nature. Critical for understanding the injuries and the scene layout.
There's also a note about an extraction from someone named Cecil, and a clarification that a photo of Abby on the bridge found online didn't come from Libby's phone.
Sounds like vetting information. Sorting out what's real evidence versus, rumors or unrelated stuff circulating online. Distinguishing verified info?
Then the investigation seems to extend to potential leads. Entries detailing notes, lead sheets, interview notes, specifically related to an individual identified as R.A.
Okay.
Includes a narrative report from an interview, R.A.'s driver's license info, updates to lead sheets. And that HHS video footage is still being analyzed, multiple stills showing a car driving east to west at specific times.
This sounds like a significant shift, doesn't it? Focusing on a specific person.
It does. It indicates a turning point. This person, RA, has become a person of interest, collecting interview notes, personal info, focusing the video analysis, suggests they were building a case or exploring a strong lead involving him.
Makes sense.
Then we see entries for photos of RA's car, taken months later at a CVS.
Okay, so continued observation.
Right, and the HH's video itself noted as not showing a plate, VIN, or driver. But then there's an enhanced, stabilized version of Libby's video with Bridge Guy, zoomed in even more.
Really trying to connect a potential suspect to the visual evidence from the scene.
It seems like it. Then, photos of a residence. And RA's car again, a black Ford Focus hatchback, exterior and interior shots.
A search warrant, presumably.
Looks like it. The interior photos show a garage with knives and a workbench, the kitchen, bags of cell phone chargers, and a surprisingly large number of phones found in an office and master bedroom.
A large number of phones. Interesting. And knives, of course, would be examined closely given the nature of the crime.
Yeah, the knives definitely stand out. More photos from the master bedroom show knives in and out of sheaths, a closet with a gun case, a blue Carhartt jacket.
Carhartt jacket might be relevant if witnesses or video suggested Bridge Guy were something similar.
And then this, a Sig Sauer .40 caliber handgun with magazines containing Blazer .40 caliber rounds, found in a nightstand.
A .40 caliber handgun. Okay, that's very significant given the .40 caliber cartridge found near the scene earlier.
Huge. There's also a wooden keepsake box mentioned containing notes, cards, mementos, and another .40 caliber round.
Another round in the box.
Wow. And get this, black and white photos of the Moon and High Bridge itself dating back to 2008, and photos of RA from 2016, including one on the bridge.
Suggests a prior interest or at least familiarity with the location. That's definitely intriguing. But the handgun's the big one here. Ballistics would be absolutely crucial.
Connecting that gun to the cartridge from the scene.
Exactly.
Okay, later entries confirm the collection of Winchester .40 caliber rounds, including one found at the scene and another found in that Hope box at RA's place.
Winchester rounds now.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so strengthening that potential link to a .40 firearm. Ballistics can often determine make and model from casings, maybe even link specific rounds.
DNA reports are mentioned, including one for someone named Derek German.
Suggests they were investigating and likely ruling out other individuals.
More sealed crime scene photos, specifically of bloodstains on a tree, and then interview transcripts with RA from October 2022, and a record of his request for an interview with the warden.
Shows the progression of interactions with him as the suspect. Ongoing efforts to gather forensic evidence and, direct testimony or statements.
Then we see something different. A binder of notes from someone named Walla, spanning several months in late 2022 and 2023, suggests really detailed documentation of something.
Could be related to many aspects, maybe witness interviews, analysis, timelines. Hard to say without more context.
A report concerning a Fujaka account and Google searches is mentioned. Another report from Walla, pictures of Richard Allen from around 2016-2017.
Fujaka account, Google searches. Sounds like digital forensics. Trying to understand his online activity around that time, the photos provide a visual reference from nearer the time of the crime.
Information about a Ford Econoline van seen in the area is also included.
Shows they weren't solely focused on RA's car, still exploring other leads, other vehicles mentioned by witnesses perhaps.
Right. And then, significantly, a zip drive containing 8 audio recordings of phone conversations between Richard Allen and 2 other people, Janice Allen and Kathy Allen, late 2022, early to mid-2023, plus a transcript.
Recorded phone calls. Potentially very valuable. Investigators would be listening for admissions, inconsistencies, discussions of the crime, anything relevant. 8 recordings suggest quite a bit of scrutiny.
What about video footage of Richard Allen at the Wabash Correctional Facility? That's listed too, along with a letter and info sheets about these videos sealed due to content.
Monitoring behavior while incarcerated sometimes reveals subtle cues, changes in demeanor, maybe statements to other inmates. Sealed suggests sensitive info, perhaps mental state, facility interactions.
Okay, the final entries in this particular set. Documents about work scans for someone named Brad Health. A photo of a vehicle resembling one he saw. A report from the fire chief about search attendees. An FBI report on statements Brad Weber made back in Feb 2017.
Still circling back to early leads, potential witnesses, even after focusing on RA. Shows the breadth. The fire chief report documents the initial search effort.
There's also a stitched-together redacted prison video, an updated sheet itemizing these videos, a huge 127-page forensic report.
That forensic report would likely detail all the findings from analyzing the physical and biological evidence collected throughout the investigation. A key document.
A handwritten letter from RA, results from an objective personality test, and a thumb drive with extensive surveillance video from RA's cell over a period of time.
Long-term surveillance in his cell, his own letter, a personality test. Different angles trying to understand the suspect.
Finally, it mentions of cell phone pings from the day of the crime, more correctional facility videos, and notes related to RA's treatment and medication logs.
Cell pings could provide location data. Treatment and medication logs might be relevant to his mental state, potential defenses. Just shows the depth and persistence, really.
So, looking at this whole collection, what does it all mean? It really gives a detailed, though, yeah, partial look into how this incredibly complex case was investigated.
You see that arc, don't you?
Yeah. The initial broad response document the scene, the victims. Then that intensive forensic effort, biologicals, clothing, Libby's phone data, which was huge.
Right. Then widening out witnesses, vehicles before narrowing focus onto RA, collecting evidence from his car, his home.
And then monitoring him after arrest. The sheer volume, the variety of exhibits, it really underscores the thoroughness, doesn't it?
Exactly. It illustrates the multifaceted nature of a major investigation like this. You see traditional crime scene work integrating with modern digital forensics.
Securing the scene, identifying victims, painstaking collection and analysis, then identifying and investigating suspects, gathering corroborating evidence.
Each piece documented here, each exhibit, contributes to that overall picture investigators were trying to build.
This deep dive into these exhibits gives us a truly fascinating, maybe incomplete, but still powerful glimpse into the Delphi investigation. You ask for a way to get well-informed quickly. And by going through these documents, we've gained, I think, a structured understanding of the types of evidence collected and kind of the timeline of how it came together officially.
We really saw how critical elements like Libby's video and all the forensic analysis that followed became central.
Yeah, and it highlights the role of technology drones, digital mapping, phone data recovery.
But also the continued importance of just traditional forensic work. Meticulous scene documentation, trace evidence, ballistics.
So it raises a question, really, for you listening. When you see this sheer volume and variety of evidence meticulously collected and cataloged, how does that shape your understanding of the event itself?
What does it tell you about the challenges, the complexities of seeking justice in a case like this?
Right. And what might the presence or maybe even the absence of certain types of evidence suggest about the narrative? This list gives a tangible framework for thinking about that whole investigative process and the weight of evidence.
It also makes you appreciate the dedication, the sheer work involved, countless hours behind each of these entries, investigators, techs, analysts, all trying to uncover the truth.
Keep exploring, keep questioning. Even in what seems like a mountain of information like this, there are always deeper layers to consider, always more to learn.
Welcome, everyone. We're doing a focused deep dive today, just for you, using the materials you sent over. We've got a pretty big stack of documents related to the Indiana v. Richard M. Allen case. Our goal here is really to cut through all the noise and pull out the most important bits, the key insights. Think of it like your personal briefing.
Yeah, and it's quite the collection. We're talking court filings, affidavits, reports, motions, orders, transcripts, you name it. And then also the trial exhibits. So photos, videos, lab reports, all that kind of stuff. It gives you a really comprehensive view.
Absolutely. And these documents, they cover a long period. We're talking February 2017 all the way through February 2025. That's 8 years.
It is 8 years of investigation, legal back and forth. We're going to try and condense that down.
Okay.
So what kind of jumps out right away is where the investigation started or where the focus was initially.
Right.
Back in early 2017, February specifically, and names like Brad Holder and Elvis Fields were heavily looked at. We've got an affidavit from Teresa Liebert pretty early on. And Elvis Fields, he actually gave a confession really early. February 14th, 2017.
Wow, Valentine's Day. Okay. And Brad Holder, too, right? His name pops up a lot in those first few months.
Oh, yeah. Loads of tips coming in about him, interviews happening throughout 2017. There's even this mention of a deleted Facebook post and some meme, a Goodfellas meme.
Yeah, I saw that. Also around mid-February 2017.
Right. Investigators flagged it. So it definitely shows there was a real intensity focused on those individuals at the very beginning.
It does seem like it. Lots of activity, getting witness statements, even those confessions you mentioned.
But, well, obviously we know now that the case didn't end there. It took a pretty significant turn just later on.
Yeah, it definitely did. You fast forward quite a few years, and suddenly Richard Allen is the name everyone's talking about.
Exactly. The October 2022 affidavit for a search warrant, that feels like a real turning point in the documents.
Okay.
And then right after that, interviews with Richard and Kathy Allen, his wife. And then, boom, late October 2022, Richard Allen is interrogated and arrested.
Such a contrast to that early stuff with Holder and Fields. Okay, so let's dig into that initial phase a bit more. What's a key takeaway about how things unfolded back in, say, 2017, 2018?
Well, I think what's really interesting here for you is seeing the uncertainty, inherent in these big cases early on. You've got all this attention on Holder and Fields, witness statements, confessions. Seems pretty strong.
Yeah, on paper.
But the focus did eventually shift, and it really kind of highlights how important it is for investigators to, well, keep an open mind, not get locked into one theory too early, even if some evidence looks compelling at first.
That's a really good point. And the timeline for Brett Holder, it's quite detailed in these papers. Beyond the Facebook stuff, there were, like you said, multiple tip reports. March 2017. They even got access to his Dropbox account in April 17.
Yeah.
And there were clearly concerns lingering. There's
Yeah.
that email from December 2018 mentioning worries about his alibi and him apparently getting rid of his phone and car.
Right. It wasn't just a fleeting thing. The suspicion around him seems to have stuck around for quite a while.
Yeah.
And same with Elvis Fields. You see that early intensity. 2 separate confessions, February 17, and then again in October 17.
2.
Yeah. And multiple interviews into 2018. They even got a search warrant related to him in June 2018. So, they were spending real resources looking into his possible involvement.
Which makes that normalization announcement even more interesting, doesn't it? That was March 2017, just a month after all this initial focus on Holder and Fields kicked off.
It does seem counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what was the thinking there? Were they trying to, I don't know, manage public expectation? Or did they genuinely think they were shifting gears even while still digging into these other leads?
That normalization point is definitely something to consider. It could have been strategic, right? Maybe ease off the public pressure, let them work more quietly. Or it could suggest they were already reassessing those first leads, like maybe realizing they needed to broaden things out, even if they weren't totally dismissing Holder and Fields yet.
Because they clearly didn't dismiss them right away.
No, exactly. The fact they kept investigating them after that announcement, well, it suggests things were complex, maybe some internal debate, uncertainty about the best path forward at that specific time.
Paints a picture of a really complicated, nonlinear investigation in those early years.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's make that jump forward. Richard Allen, October 2022. What were the key events that seemed to flip the switch?
The documents really point to October 13th, 2022. That seems like the day.
Okay.
That's when a detective Tony Liggett's affidavit for a search warrant was filed. And, to get a warrant, you need probable cause.
Right. You need to convince a judge.
Exactly. You need a reasonable belief based on evidence that a crime happened, and you'll find evidence of it where you want to search. The fact that the warrant was signed and executed, returned on the same day.
Suggests urgency or strong evidence presented.
Probably both. It suggests the judge found sufficient cause pretty quickly. And then also on October 13th, they interviewed Kathy Allen and Richard Allen.
Wow, busy day, and things seem to move fast after that.
Yeah, the timeline really picks up pace then. Just a few days later, October 17th, there's correspondence about picking up Richard Allen's vehicle.
Okay.
Then, October 19th, lab certificates of analysis come in. So it feels like, the pieces were maybe starting to click into place pretty rapidly for law enforcement.
Right.
And all that leads up to Richard Allen's interrogation on October 26th, and then his arrest and booking same day.
October 26th. After years of, public silence about suspects, that must have been huge news.
Oh, absolutely. A massive development.
And then almost right away, the court records get sealed.
Uh-huh.
Late October, early November 2022.
Yes. The court cited public interest and safety concerns.
Given how much attention this case had, what's your take on that? Sealing records like that, there are competing interests there, right?
Oh, definitely. It's a real tension you see in these high-profile cases. On one side, the court's trying to protect the investigation, the integrity of future proceedings.
Right, avoiding tainting a jury pool or something.
Exactly. Intense media coverage, public speculation. It could compromise witness testimony or even the defendant's right to a fair trial. But on the other hand, transparency is, well, fundamental.
Yeah, people want to know what's happening.
The public has a legitimate interest, especially in a case like this. How is justice being done? The court order did mention that the records should be unsealed once the reasons for sealing them were gone, so that's an attempt to, strike a balance.
A tough balancing act for
Yeah.
sure. Okay, so let's move into the next phase, the main legal proceedings. Basically, November 2022 through the end of 2024. This is a really dense period in the documents. Lots of filings, orders, hearings. Can you give us a sense of the key battles, the major developments during that time?
Sure. So right after Allen's first court appearances and getting his lawyers appointed in November 2022, one of the first things you see is the media jumping in.
Trying to get those records unsealed.
Exactly. Almost immediately, November 22 and continuing into February 23 really underscores that intense public interest we were just talking about.
And the court, in response, put out orders about extrajudicial statements, trying to keep people involved from talking publicly.
That's right, starting December 22 into January 23. Basically telling lawyers, law enforcement, maybe even family members, don't talk about the case outside of court.
Trying to control the narrative. Keep potential jurors clean.
Yeah, pretty much. Standard procedure in big cases, but it shows the court was aware of the potential for outside influence.
Okay, and then February 2023, there's a protective order granted for discovery. Discovery is when the sides share evidence, right? So what does a protective order mean for that?
Exactly. Discovery is the formal evidence exchange. A protective order puts rules on how that shared evidence can be used, who gets to see it, what they can do with it.
Why do that?
Often it's to protect sensitive stuff, like maybe witness names, addresses, or details investigators don't want out there yet. It prevents evidence from just being, leaked or spread around in a way that could mess up the trial.
So maybe the defense couldn't share certain police reports widely, even with their own experts, without asking the judge first.
Something like that, yeah. It just adds a layer of control over sensitive information.
Got it. Okay, so through 2023 and into 2024, it looks like just a constant flow of legal maneuvers. Hearings about Allen's well-being in jail.
Right. There were concerns raised about his condition in custody.
Motions to subpoena records from third parties.
Yeah, the defense trying to get information from people or places not directly involved in the charges, maybe exploring those other leads. April, May 2023 for those.
And then finally, some documents do get unsealed in June 2023.
Correct. Likely a result of that ongoing pressure for transparency, but probably still balancing it against protecting the case. So not everything, but some things became public.
It really sounds like a lot of legal push and pull.
Oh, absolutely. That's just the nature of these complex cases. Both sides are constantly filing motions, responding, arguing before the judge.
And then August 2023, depositions of people involved way back in the early investigation. Sounds like the defense was definitely revisiting those Holder and Fields leads.
Precisely. That tells you the defense was being thorough, right? Questioning why the focus shifted away from those initial suspects, trying to build their own narrative.
Okay, then October 2023 looks like a really big month. Defense motions about discovery deadlines, sure, but then the defense lawyers withdraw and get reappointed, and then the original lawyers are disqualified.
Yeah, that was a major, major event. Very unusual.
What does that kind of shakeup mean for a case?
Well, it can have huge impacts. First, the new lawyers need time to catch up. That often means delays. They have to review everything, develop their own strategy. For the defendant, it's unsettling, but maybe also offers a fresh start, a new perspective. The disqualification part, though, that suggests there were serious issues. Maybe conflicts of interest, ethical problems, something the judge felt required removing them entirely.
Wow. Okay. And around the same time, starting September 2023, the defense files for Frank's hearings and motions to suppress evidence. These sound important. What are they trying to do there?
They are very important. So a Frank's hearing basically is the defense challenging the truthfulness of the affidavit used to get a search warrant.
Like the one for Allen's property back in October 22.
Exactly. They'd argue that the police knowingly included false statements or acted with reckless disregard for the truth to get the judge to sign off.
And if they win?
If they win a Frank's hearing, the warrant could be invalidated, and any evidence found because of that warrant might get thrown out. Suppressed.
Suppressed means the jury can't hear about it.
Correct. And motions to suppress aren't just about warrants. They can argue any evidence was obtained illegally, maybe a violation of Miranda rights during an interrogation, an illegal search, and shouldn't be allowed at trial. These are fundamental challenges aimed right at the heart of the prosecution's case.
Makes sense. Okay, so the trial date gets pushed back a few times, finally lands in October 2024. And leading up to it, Tons of motions in limine and motions to compel. Sounds like arguing before the arguing even starts.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Motions in limine are basically pretrial fights about what evidence the jury will or won't hear. Each side tries to exclude stuff that hurts them and include stuff that helps them before the trial starts.
Trying to shape the battlefield.
Exactly. And motions to compel are when one side says, hey, the other side is supposed to give us this piece of evidence or information, and they haven't, so make them. The sheer volume tells you how contested everything was.
Okay, let's talk about the evidence the jury did see. The list of trial exhibits is huge. It starts with things like the Snapchat photos the girls took.
Right, showing them heading towards the bridge, establishes the timeline, their location.
Drone footage, maps of the whole area.
Crucial for context. Giving the jury that visual, the layout of the trails, Deer Creek, the bridge itself, spatial understanding.
And then clothing, personal items found near the creek. Lab reports on all that stuff. A Nike shoe, jeans, T-shirt, and that .40 Euro caliber cartridge.
Yeah, that unspent .40 Euro caliber round found between the victims' bodies was obviously a huge piece of physical evidence for the prosecution.
Biological samples, too. Swabs, hairs.
Yeah.
The iPhone found under Abby's body. And Richard Allen's first statements to police back in 2017.
Standard forensic collection, the biological stuff, the phone, potentially full of data, and Allen's early statements, yeah, the prosecution would scrutinize those for any inconsistencies or admissions.
And then evidence specifically linked to Allen. Items from his house. Knives, a 6-hour .40 handgun, blazer ammunition.
Right. Finding a .40 caliber 6-hour pistol, especially with blazer ammo, possibly matching the type, when a .40 cal round was found at the scene. That's central to their case.
And photos of him, photos of the bridge from before, and a comparison of a bullet from his home ammo to the one at the scene.
Yeah, the photos could suggest familiarity with the area, and that ballistics comparison, trying to link the unspent round directly to ammo Allen possessed, that would be absolutely critical testimony.
There were also the records of his October 2022 interviews.
Right, the interrogation leading to his arrest.
Notes from a Dr. Walla, who evaluated him. Audio recordings of his phone calls from jail.
The evaluation notes could touch on his mental state. Jail calls are often recorded, potentially capturing unguarded comments.
And even video showing conditions at the Westville prison where he was held.
That likely related to defense arguments about his treatment, his mental or physical health decline while incarcerated, possibly impacting his ability to assist in his defense or relating to confessions he later made.
And then there was that whole Odinism angle the defense brought up. Motions to admit evidence about Norse paganism.
Yeah.
That got a lot of attention.
It did. The defense was clearly trying to point the finger elsewhere, suggesting an alternative theory of the crime, that maybe someone connected to those beliefs was responsible, trying to create reasonable doubt about Allen.
We also saw pre-trial testimony, July, August 2024. Detectives, a prison warden, a Dr. Perlmutter, still arguing about evidence suppression and admissibility.
Yep. These hearings are where the judge makes final calls on disputed evidence before the jury hears it. Detective testimony would cover how evidence was found, how interrogations happened, the warden, likely about jail conditions or Allen's behavior. Dr. Perlmutter might have been a forensic expert or psychologist related to specific evidence.
But ultimately, the defense lost those bids for a Franks hearing and to appeal some rulings right away. That was August, September 2024.
Correct. The judge denied those key defense motions, clearing the way for trial.
And then jury selection happens in Allen County, but the trial itself is back in Carroll County in October 2024. Why moves jury selection?
Standard practice for high-profile cases, really. Change of venue for jury selection. The idea is to find jurors in a different county who hopefully haven't been saturated by all the local news coverage in Carroll County.
To get a more impartial jury.
That's the goal. But the trial stayed in Carroll County, likely for convenience, closer to the crime scene, witnesses, etc.
And the trial itself sounds like it covered a lot of ground. Testimony from family, police, forensic experts, jail staff, even people tied to those early Holderfield's investigations.
Yeah, the prosecution would call witnesses to build their timeline, present the forensic links, Allen's statements. The defense bringing in people from the early investigation suggests they were still trying to highlight those alternative possibilities. And they presented their own expert on behavioral health, too.
Suggesting maybe something about Allen's mental state.
Could be related to intent, state of mind, or perhaps mitigating factors if it got to sentencing.
Okay, so after all that, the trial concludes. There are motions for acquittal, which I gather are standard.
Yes. The defense asks the judge to rule there isn't enough evidence for a conviction, basically. Usually denied at that stage.
And then, December 2024, the verdict comes down. Richard Allen convicted on 2 counts, sentenced to 130 years.
That's the outcome of the trial phase. Yes, a very significant sentence.
But not the end of the legal road based on these documents.
Rarely is in cases like this.
Right. We see motions to preserve all the evidence, requests for appellate counsel to handle the appeal, late 2024, early 2025.
Standard next steps. Preserving evidence ensures everything is available for the appeal. Getting appellate counsel appointed officially kicks off that process.
And the media is still involved, filing motions in February 2025 to get access to the trial exhibits themselves.
Shows the enduring public interest wanting to see the actual evidence presented to the jury.
And finally, also February 2025, the trial court denies the defense's motion to correct errors, and another motion about preserving specific evidence post-sentencing.
Right. That essentially means the trial judge is standing by the rulings made during and after the trial, and the next arguments will happen before the appeals court.
Well, that was a journey. You've really managed to condense a huge amount of complex information from these documents.
It's a lot of process.
It really is. It's striking, isn't it, how the investigation started down one path, or really a couple of paths, for quite a while before pivoting so dramatically to Richard Allen years later.
It absolutely underscores the challenges, the twists and turns, the sheer volume of information, the legal complexities. It shows how difficult seeking justice in these horrific cases can be.
So for you, our listener, who wanted this deep dive, hopefully this gives you that solid overview you were looking for, a way to grasp the timeline, the big shifts in focus, the key legal fights, without getting lost in every single filing.
Exactly. Understanding that broad trajectory from Fields and Holder to Allen through the warrants, the trial, the appeals starting, gives you a really valuable framework for thinking about the case based on these materials.
So a final thought then, considering this whole timeline, all the different avenues explored, what does this case really tell us about the challenges of these kinds of major investigations? And maybe for you listening, based on this dive into the documents provided, what other questions pop into your mind? What else might you want to explore?
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into a case that, well, just keeps raising questions. The Allen Worthy case.
That's right.
And our focus today is really specific. We're looking closely at a transcript from an interview done back on October 13th, 2022.
With an individual the interviewers, Mullines and Liggett, call Rick.
Exactly. But there's a big caveat right from the start, something you really need to keep in mind as we talk through this.
Yeah, this is important. The speaker labels in the original transcript we're working from, they might not actually be accurate.
Right, which could potentially, change how you interpret some of these exchanges.
Absolutely. If you're not sure who exactly is saying what, it adds a layer of uncertainty to the whole thing. It might make some parts feel a bit disjointed.
So keep that in mind. Our mission today isn't about solving the whole case. Nope. We're focused purely on this one transcript.
Flaws and all.
Flaws and all. What does this specific conversation tell us, or maybe not tell us, about Rick's possible connection to what happened, just based on these words on the page?
And it's not like this interview happened right at the beginning. The people talking to Rick, they identified themselves, say they're with the Fairfax Sheriff's Department and the prosecutor's office.
Mm-hmm.
They actually mention they're going back, revisiting the start of the case, talking to everyone who was out at the trails that day.
So it sounds like a re-interview, maybe, trying to firm things up or check earlier statements.
Could be. Trying to get a clearer picture, talking to people again.
And the interview kicks off pretty formally. They read Rick his Miranda rights.
Yeah, even though they make a point of saying, look, you're not under arrest, you can leave whenever you want.
Still, it sets a certain tone, doesn't it? Make sure he knows his rights, even if it's technically not a custodial interrogation. Okay, so let's get into the meat of it. Where does the conversation start?
Well, right away they bring up a previous chat Rick had with Lieutenant Doolin.
Okay. So this definitely confirms it wasn't the first contact. He's already on their radar, already given some kind of account.
Exactly. It's a follow-up.
And almost immediately, there's a potential issue flagged.
Right. The timeline. According to Lieutenant Doolin's notes from that earlier talk, Rick supposedly said he was on the trail. Somewhere between 1:30 p.m. and 3:30 p.m.
Okay. But that's not what Rick says now.
No. In this interview, his memory is different. He thinks he was there earlier. Much earlier, around noon.
Around noon. How does he figure that?
He says he left his mom's place over in Peru, Indiana, maybe 11:00, 11:1 feet a.m., something like that, and went straight to the trails.
That's quite a difference, not just a few minutes.
No, it's significant, an hour and a half, maybe more. And, when you're talking about a crime scene, that kind of time difference is huge. It changes whether he could have even been there during the critical window.
Investigators would obviously want to nail that down. Phone records, maybe other witnesses.
For sure. They'd be looking for anything to confirm one timeline or the other. And again, with those potentially shaky speaker labels, is it clear who brings up Doolin's note and how Rick responds? That nuance could be lost if the labels are off.
Good point. So Rick's got this earlier time frame in mind now. What else does he say about his visit?
He describes his usual walk, what he normally does there.
Okay.
Goes down the high bridge. He mentions liking to look for fish. Says he enjoys fishing. Then he sits on a bench that overlooks another trail section, and then he leaves.
So it sounds like a routine thing for him, a regular spot.
Seems like it, yeah. Like something he did fairly often.
Right.
Which is helpful for investigators, right?
Yeah.
Establishing a baseline.
Does his story for that specific day match his usual routine?
From what he says here, it sounds pretty consistent with his general description. They'd be listening for any weird deviations, anything out of the ordinary for him.
Did he see anyone?
He does mention seeing people. He remembers seeing 3 girls. They were walking off the trailhead as he was maybe heading in or out.
3 girls. Does he describe them?
Yeah, he says there was an older girl who looked like she was kind of keeping an eye on 2 younger girls. He thought the younger 2 looked similar, maybe sisters.
Does he say they were the girls, Libby and Abby?
He doesn't explicitly identify them. He just describes this group of 3 he saw. But what he does say is that he doesn't remember seeing anyone else significant.
Okay, so that's potentially important. It might place him near the victims, time-wise and location-wise, if that was them.
Potentially. But it's just his recollection of seeing 3 girls. Investigators probably would have shown him pictures at some point, you'd think. His lack of positive ID here is, well, it's another data point for them.
And he mentioned something about parking, too.
Right. He adds a detail. Says he remembers seeing 2 cars parked at what they call the farmer's entrance when he was leaving.
Why is that important?
Because he uses it to back up his claim that he didn't park there.
See, there were other cars there. That wasn't my spot.
Gotcha. But where did he park, does he say?
Well, this is where it gets a bit fuzzy. Even in the interview, there seems to be some confusion about the parking spots around there.
How so?
They talk about a few different locations. There's the old Farm Bureau building, which someone suggests might actually be the old welfare office.
Then there's that farmer's entrance. And also another spot, maybe near a smaller bridge, like an unused one. That's before you get to the main Monon High Bridge. The big blue bridge they call Freedom Bridge later.
So, multiple options, and maybe the names are confusing too.
And things change over time, right? Parking access might not be the same now as it was in 2017.
So, Rick isn't totally sure where he parked that specific day.
He seems a bit uncertain. He suggests it was probably near that smaller bridge, or maybe by the old Farm Bureau welfare building. He even mentions that parking availability changed, implying he might have used different spots on different visits over the years.
Could just be memory fading over time?
Could be. Or it could be something the interviewers are focusing on, looking for inconsistencies. They also talk about how you actually get onto the trail from these different parking areas.
Like which path you'd take.
Yeah, including mentioning a gravel path that apparently wasn't always there. It was added later. So understanding the layout and access points back then is part of reconstructing movements.
Makes sense. Okay, what about his car itself? Did they talk about what he was driving?
They did, yeah. They tried to figure out which car he would have had back in 2017.
Does he remember?
Well, he lays out a history of his vehicles. He had a red Ford Focus at some point, then a gray Ford 500, a 2006 model, and then later a black car, a 2016 model.
Why that changes?
He gives reasons. Mentions an accident, I think, that led to getting the black car, needing better gas mileage for a commute he had at the time.
Okay. So which one does he think he drove to the trails that day?
He's not 100% sure initially. He leans towards it being the gray Ford 500.
Another point of uncertainty.
Yep. Another detail investigators would want to confirm if possible. Could there have been witnesses who saw a specific car? Or maybe CCTV somewhere. And again, if those speaker labels are wonky...
It might be hard to track who's pushing for this info versus Rick's maybe hesitant answers.
Exactly.
Anything else come up before things get more intense?
There was a slightly unexpected mention of a hobby.
Oh, yeah.
Rick mentions he follows the stock market, trades stocks.
Okay. Seems a bit random.
Well, the interviewers noted down. And apparently, he'd mentioned it to Lieutenant Doolin in the previous conversation, too. So it wasn't totally new information to them.
Did he say why he brought it up? Yeah, it actually ties back into his timeline. He says that's why he didn't hang around the trails too long that day. He wanted to get home relatively quickly after his walk to check on his stocks on his computer.
Ah, okay. So it provides a reason for a shorter visit, supporting his earlier timeline of being there around noon and not staying until mid-afternoon.
Exactly. Gives context to his movements that day.
All right. What about what he was wearing? That could be crucial.
Definitely. He gives a description. Says he was wearing blue jeans and a jacket.
What kind of jacket?
He thinks it was probably black, maybe, with a hood built into it. He says possibly an off-brand, but similar in style to, like, a Carhartt jacket.
Okay. Blue jeans, blackish hooded jacket.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? A hat?
He mentions he usually keeps a skull cap, like a beanie, in his coat pocket. But he wasn't sure if he actually wore it that day. So, maybe a hat, maybe not. What about shoes?
Even fuzzier there. He suggests maybe just older tennis shoes. Or, he adds, possibly work boots, especially if it had been wet or muddy.
So, not a super precise description overall. Jeans, dark jacket, maybe a hat, uncertain shoes.
Right. Which isn't that unusual, is it? Remembering exactly what you wore on a random day years ago. But for investigators,
If they have any description from witnesses, or especially that photo they mention later, these details become potentially very important, even the type of shoe if they found footprints.
precisely, every little bit matters.
Okay, so we have his account of the walk, the time, what he saw, where he might have parked his car, his clothes. Where does the interview go next? Because it sounds like the tone changes.
It really does. The shift happens when they bring up his phone.
The data trail.
Yep. They basically ask if they can look at his phone data to confirm his location, see if the phone data matches his story about being there around noon.
The standard procedure these days, I guess. What phone did he have?
He says his current phone is a Google Pixel, and his provider is Ting, which he mentions might use Verizon's network.
But they wouldn't want his current phone data from 2022, right? They'd need the data from 2017.
Exactly. And they make that clear, they're interested in the phone he had back then, around the time of the murders.
Do you still have it?
He thinks maybe? Says the old phone might be stuck away in a closet somewhere at home.
And is he willing to let them look?
Initially, he seems sort of open to it, cooperative, but then he pauses.
Hesitates.
Yeah. He decides he wants to talk to his wife first before he agrees to any kind of phone search.
Okay. That's his right, of course.
Mm.
But it definitely marks a shift from just chatting to something else.
A definite shift. And then the interviewers really ramp things up. They drop a bit of a bombshell on him. They reveal they've already spoken to his wife and his daughter.
Whoa. Without telling him first.
Apparently. You can imagine how that might land. It changes the dynamic instantly. He might feel ambushed or like they're going behind his back.
Yeah, that would make anyone uncomfortable. Did they say what the wife and daughter told them?
They don't detail the conversation, but just revealing they had had the conversation was likely a tactic. See how he reacts.
And they bring up something else personal too, right?
They do. Very personal. They mention Rick having had suicidal thoughts in the past.
Wow. Okay. Why bring that up?
It's hard to say for sure from just the transcript. Maybe they're trying to gauge his mental state around 2017, or maybe it's, frankly, maybe it's a pressure tactic. It feels confrontational.
It really does. And then comes the photo.
The big one. They tell him about a picture taken, they say, with one of the girls' phones. And it shows someone on the bridge.
The bridge photo.
Presumably. And here's the crux. They tell Rick that the person in that picture matches the description he just gave them of his clothes.
Blue jeans, similar color jacket, and a hat.
Exactly. They draw that direct comparison.
How does Rick react to that?
Strongly. Very strongly. He absolutely denies it's him in the picture. Unequivocal denial.
Says that's not me.
Flat out. And he doubles down, says he never even met the girls. It's a direct clash. Their claim about the photo versus his adamant denial.
This is where the lack of seeing the actual photo makes it hard for us. We don't know how clear it is, how strong the resemblance might be.
Exactly. We only have the words. His denial is firm. Their assertion is firm.
Do they have anything else connecting him visually?
They mention another picture, this one apparently showing a car. They suggest it's Rick's car.
And what does he say to that?
He's less definitive there. He acknowledges it could be his car, or one like it.
So that potentially places his vehicle near the scene, or at least a similar vehicle.
Right. It's more circumstantial than the photo ID claim, but it's another piece they're presenting to him.
How's Rick holding up through all this?
You can tell his discomfort is growing. He explicitly says he feels like he's being interrogated, like they see him as a suspect, despite the initial "you're free to leave" reassurances.
Understandable, given the turn the conversation took.
and it leads to him drawing a line. When they presumably ask about searching his house, he refuses. Says he won't consent to a house search without talking to his wife first.
Sticking to his guns on wanting to consult his wife before allowing searches?
Yes, which, again, is his right. But in that charged atmosphere, it probably doesn't help alleviate the interviewer's suspicions. And let's not forget the speaker label issue here.
Right. During this really tense back and forth, if we're unsure who's saying exactly which specific interviewer is pushing which point, it could subtly change our perception of the whole confrontation.
It really could. The nuances of who's leading the questioning versus who's reacting could be blurred.
Does the timeline issue come back up? The 1:40 versus noon thing?
It does. They circle back to it. They bring up that 1003.30 p.m. time frame again, the one from L.T. Doolin's notes.
Still pushing on that discrepancy. Seems important to them.
Very. It suggests they see it as a significant inconsistency in his story over time. But maybe the most critical disagreement comes down to where on the bridge he was.
Not just when, but where. How so?
The interviewers claim that Rick previously told L.T. Doolin he walked out onto the bridge, implying maybe further out.
Okay.
But Rick, in this interview, clarifies. He says, no, he only went to about the first platform or section. He insists he did not go way out to the far side.
And why is that distinction so important?
Because the person in that famous photograph is generally believed to have been seen further out on the bridge, towards the far end from where the girls started.
So if Rick is telling the truth now that he only went to the first platform, he couldn't be the person in the photo, assuming the photo shows someone further down.
Precisely. It's a crucial point of contention. His location on the bridge. Are the interviewers accurately recalling Doolin's notes? Is Rick misremembering now? Or was he perhaps less precise in the first interview? It's a major point of disagreement.
So the interview is winding down, but the conflict is peaking.
Absolutely. The interviewers hammer the closing point again. Your description matches the guy in the photo.
And Rick's had enough by this point.
Seems like it. His anger is palpable in the transcript. He tells them straight up, my trust is lost here.
Wow.
And he basically gives them an ultimatum. Either arrest me or take me home.
He's done talking.
Completely. The transcript notes some final negative remarks from him, and then the interview just ends. Abruptly.
Okay, so let's recap. We went through this whole transcript. We saw the initial discrepancy about the time he was there.
The 1:40 to 3:30 versus noon timeline.
Right. We heard his description of his walk, seeing the three girls, the confusion over parking.
His uncertainty about the car, but a fairly consistent clothing description, minus the hat and shoes maybe.
Then the request for the phone, the revelation they'd spoken to his family, the mention of past issues.
Leading to the confrontation over the bridge photo. His strong denial versus their claim of a match.
And the critical disagreement about where on the bridge he actually went.
Ending with his refusal to cooperate further without his wife involved, his anger, and the interview terminating.
So the big question for anyone listening, based only on this transcript, what can you actually conclude?
It's really tough, isn't it? Just from these pages, you've got points that seem suspicious or at least warrant follow-up from law enforcement's perspective.
Like being there that day, the general clothing match, the car potentially being seen nearby, the timeline inconsistencies.
And his increasing resistance towards the end of the interview.
But then you have his side. He consistently denies being the person in the photo.
Denies ever meeting the girls.
Offers an explanation for his timing the stocks. Clarifies his location on the bridge, saying he wasn't where the photo person likely was.
And his decision to consult his wife before allowing searches, well, maybe raising eyebrows, is perfectly legal.
What parts of his story seem credible, just reading it? His description of the walk seems fairly straightforward. Seeing the girls. The stock market reason for leaving.
Those parts felt reasonably consistent. But the inconsistencies highlighted by the interviewers, like the timeline and maybe the exact path on the bridge, those definitely raise questions.
It really shows how tricky interpreting just a transcript can be. You're missing so much context. Tone of voice, body language.
And the actual evidence they're referring to, like the photo, we can't see it.
Yeah.
We just hear their description and his reaction.
It drives home how vital it is for investigators to look at everything, not just one interview in isolation.
Absolutely. And bringing it back to that initial point we made.
The speaker labels.
Yeah. If those labels in the original document might be wrong, think about how that could complicate things. Could a question attributed to interviewer A actually have been asked by interviewer B, changing the flow? Could a specific denial from Rick be in response to a slightly different prompt than what's written?
It adds this whole other layer of potential confusion, doesn't it? Relying on records that might have fundamental inaccuracies in who said what. What are the implications of that for an investigation, or even later for a trial?
It's a sobering thought, really. How much do we depend on the accuracy of these foundational documents? And what happens if they're flawed? Something definitely worth thinking about. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Hey there.
Today we're jumping straight into a really compelling document. It's a transcript from an interrogation, October 26, 2022.
Right. And this involves Rick Holman questioning Rick Allen. It's all connected to a search warrant executed, about 2 weeks earlier, October 13th.
Exactly. And the core of what we want to unpack today is the evidence. Specifically, what Holman lays out against Allen regarding the deaths of those two young girls back in February 2017.
And just as importantly, Allen's reactions. How does he respond when faced with this? That's key.
It really is. So our source here is the actual interrogation transcript. We've got excerpts, and our goal, our mission, if you like, is to just break down this exchange.
Looking at the claims, the counterclaims, the evidence itself, helping you really understand what went down in that room.
Okay, so let's dive in. Where does Holman even start?
Well, he starts pretty methodically. He goes over the property record, the receipt for items they seized from Allen's place on the 13th. Standard procedure, really.
Standard, but what was on the list? What did they actually take? Okay, so first up, one pair of dirty Thorogood work boots, men's size 7.5.
Okay.
Then some clothing, specifically clothing Allen himself apparently mentioned he might have been wearing that day, February 13th, 2017, when he was on the bridge.
Interesting. He volunteered that. What else?
Some knives were taken, also Allen's car, and, crucially, a Sig Sauer handgun, a .40 caliber.
That's Sig Sauer. Okay, I'm filing that away. That sounds important.
It definitely becomes important, very important. It's kind of the centerpiece later on.
But before they get to the main event with the gun, there's this weird little detour, right, about firearms in general.
Yeah, it's interesting. Holman starts talking about his own history with guns, service weapons. Said he carried Berettas in the Marines, then Berettas and Glocks early in his state police career, and now SIGs. Why bring that up? Trying to build rapport, bit of small talk.
Could be. Maybe trying to find some common ground. He asks Allen about his experience, if he shoots much, asks if there's an indoor range in Delphi.
And Allen says,
not that he knows of in Delphi, but mentions there's one over in Kokomo. Seems to have limited experience compared to Holman.
And Holman mentions shooting his own SIG. Where? In a ditch.
Yeah. Says he lives out in the country, shoots it in a ditch sometimes. It feels a bit random, but, maybe it's calculated. Hard to say for sure.
Gives you a little insight into Holman, maybe. So, after the gun chat, where does the conversation go?
He pivots back to the seized items. Says the lab has a question. They need to know if Allen loaned any of those things out for, a significant period.
Loaned them out, like his truck or... Wait, Holman called it a Ford Focus?
Yeah.
Allen has a Focus.
Well, that seems to be a mistake in the transcript. Or, by Holman, Allen apparently had a Ford truck. But the point was, had he loaned out significant items like his vehicle? Importantly, Holman says they're not asking about family members borrowing stuff.
Right, okay. And did Allen recall loaning anything major out?
No. He says he can't recall loaning out his truck, or, presumably, the other key items like the gun.
Okay, that's crucial context for any forensic evidence later, if you didn't learn it out.
Exactly. It tightens the connection between Allen and those items, and this leads Holman right to, what he calls the meat and potatoes of it.
Here we go. The handgun results.
Yes. He starts explaining how firearm analysis works. He tells Allen that the firing pin marks, the extraction marks, they're unique to each gun.
Like fingerprints, is that the analogy he uses?
That's exactly it. Like fingerprints, he says. Unique to that specific gun, setting the stage for the big reveal.
Which is?
He reveals that Allen's Sig Sauer .40 cal was sent to the lab, and it was compared to an item found at the scene, found on February 14th, the day after, where the girls' bodies were discovered.
Tells me.
An unspent .4 of caliber Winchester round.
Okay, an unspent round.
And Holman tells Allen, point blank, the extraction marks on that round, the one found at the scene, they match Allen's gun.
Wow. Match his gun. He actually shows him pictures.
Yep. Presents pictures of the round, the markings. Says the lab confirmed the match. This is the moment the pressure really ramps up.
I can only imagine. How does Allen react to that? Being told a bullet linked to his gun was found near the victims.
Just complete disbelief. Shock. He says things like, There's no way. There isn't. I'm telling you, there's not. He absolutely denies his round or that he knows how it could possibly be there. Seems genuinely stunned.
Flat denial. So Holman's got this scientific evidence. Allen's denying it. What does Holman do? How does he push back?
He hammers on the science, says, look, this is an opinion, this is scientific analysis, experts confirmed it, and then he adds a really chilling detail.
What's that?
He tells Allen where the round was found, within 6 inches of one of the girls' bodies, specifically near Liberty German's foot.
6 inches, wow.
And he adds it hadn't been there long, suggesting it was deposited around the time of the murders.
Okay, so location and timing, that's damning if true.
And then Holman shifts tactics a bit. Uses that sort of good cop approach. He says, look, the prosecutor, other investigators, they just want to lock him up and throw away the key.
Implying Holman is different, that he wants to help.
Exactly. He positions himself as the guy on Allen's side, the one Allen should talk to, the one who wants his side of the story before it's too late, urges him to explain.
Does he bring up anything else to bolster his case at this point, besides the bullet?
Oh, yeah. He throws more things out there. He mentions witnesses, says people saw Allen's vehicle there, saw him there.
Near the girls.
Well, in the vicinity. He also mentions experts, people who supposedly identified Allen from that video and identified his voice.
The down-the-hill voice.
Presumably. He's layering on the pressure. And he clarifies something important, too. He tells Allen the round wasn't found on the bridge itself.
Why is that significant?
Because Allen admitted being on the bridge. So Holman's saying, okay, you were on the bridge, but this crucial piece of evidence, this round from your gun, it was found down by the bodies, connecting Allen not just to the location generally, but to the specific crime scene.
Right, trying to close that gap.
And he warns Allen about the media, too. Says, you know, this is going to get ugly. They'll paint you as a monster. Telling the truth now is the only way to get ahead of it.
So the pressure is immense. Witnesses, video, voice ID, and this seemingly irrefutable bullet. He then asks him directly, right, how did your round get there?
Yes, the million-dollar question, how did your round get next to Liberty German?
And Allen's response. Still denial.
Still absolute denial. I don't know, it's not mine. He insists he has no idea, but he also expresses just how much this is affecting him. The stress, the anxiety.
How so?
He talks about feeling like everyone already thinks he's guilty, his job, his neighbors. Everything's impacted, says he's incredibly stressed out. You really get a sense of the toll it's taking on him personally.
You can hear the desperation, maybe, even while maintaining innocence.
Definitely. It paints a picture of someone feeling completely cornered, overwhelmed.
They do briefly confirm the gun ownership again, right? Just nailing that down.
Yeah, a quick confirmation. Allen agrees, yes, it's his SIG .40, thinks he bought it back around 2001 over in Peru.
And Holman confirms that.
Yep, Holman says, yeah, we know.
Yeah.
Shows they've done their homework on the gun's history, reinforces that it is Allen's gun they tested.
So from Holman's perspective, the logic seems inescapable at this point.
That's exactly how he frames it. He lays it out. It's your gun. You say you didn't loan it out. The science says a round ejected from your gun was found next to the victim. Therefore,
Your gun had to be there.
Okay.
At the scene where the girls were killed.
That's the argument, presented as simple, unavoidable logic.
But Allen, he still doesn't accept it.
Not at all. He pushes back hard, says there is no way, repeats it, absolutely adamant that a round from his gun couldn't have been there near the girls, near the bridge. He's just completely unwavering on that.
What happens next? Does the interrogation shift focus?
Yeah, there's a procedural step next. Holman serves him with a warrant.
A warrant for...
Which is DNA, a cheek swab, basically. Says they need it to compare against any potential DNA evidence found at the scene.
Standard procedure in a case like this, I imagine. Does Allen consent?
Yes, he agrees to provide the sample. Doesn't resist that.
Okay. Then Holman circles back to something Allen said earlier about things being over.
Right. Holman brings up that Allen apparently said it's over after Holman mentions searching his property. Holman seems to imply it was an admission.
But Allen clarifies.
Yeah, Allen explains what he meant. He says, it's over, meant his life, his reputation, that was over. The damage was already done because of the investigation, because everyone thought he did it. He's saying it was about the consequence, not the crime itself.
Ah, okay. A very different interpretation.
Definitely. And then Holman offers, well, maybe a slightly different theory, or at least probes a different angle.
What does he suggest?
He says something like, I don't think you're the one who stuck the knife in them, but then immediately asks, are you that guy? It's a bit ambiguous.
Suggesting maybe he was involved, but not the actual killer. Or maybe just present.
Something like that. Maybe trying to give Alan an out a way to admit some level of involvement without admitting to the murders themselves.
And Alan's reaction to being called potentially violent, even in that context.
He sounds genuinely shocked, outraged even, vehemently denies being capable of anything like that, says anyone who knows him knows he's not violent.
So they've reached a kind of stalemate here.
Pretty much an impasse. Alan insists, "I've told you the truth," says he won't make up a story. Holman keeps insisting the evidence says otherwise, that it points directly to Alan.
Does Holman bring up the science again?
Oh, yes. He keeps coming back to it. The scientists, the analysis, the report, they don't lie. Says the report is clear. The round came from Alan's gun. But Alan just seems unable or unwilling to accept it.
The conversation then gets even heavier, right? Talk of consequences.
Yeah. Holman really raises the stakes. He mentions the severity, brings up the death penalty.
Wow. And Alan's response to that.
It's quite shocking, honestly. He says something to the effect of, he doesn't even care about living anymore. The stress from all this is just too much.
That's incredibly bleak.
Yeah.
Shows the immense pressure he's under.
It really does. A very powerful statement about his mental state at that moment.
Holman also brings up witnesses again, doesn't he? With more specifics.
Yes. He claims there are up to 5 witnesses who saw Alan on the bridge with the girls.
With the girls. Alan denies that, right?
Immediately denies it. Says he never saw them. Holman also mentions another witness, a woman who apparently saw Alan on the platform and then saw the girls pass him just moments before they disappeared and were later found dead.
Positioning Alan as the last person seen near them.
Exactly, trying to establish him as the last point of contact.
But Alan maintains he never even met them.
Correct. States clearly he'd never met them before that day, denies any interaction at all.
Throughout all this, Holman keeps saying his goal is just the truth.
That's his stated aim, yes. Just wants to know what really happened.
What about Alan's wife? Does her perspective come up?
It does. Alan mentions his wife will back him up, say he's innocent. But later, Holman claims the wife told investigators something different.
Oh, like what?
Holman claims she said Alan lied to her about going out to join the search party back in 2017, and that his depression got worse after the murders happened. Alan seems surprised, maybe dismayed, to hear this.
Conflicting accounts there. Does Holman offer that alternative theory about how the round might have gotten there, the accidental ejection?
Yes, later on he does float that specific scenario. He suggests maybe Alan was on the trail, maybe he got angry, perhaps the girl said something and he racked the slide on his gun just to scare them.
And the unspent round ejected without him realizing.
That's the theory Holman puts out there. He asks Alan directly, "Do you carry with one in the chamber?"
And does he?
Alan says generally, yes, he does.
So Holman's offering a way it could have happened without necessarily firing the gun at them. Still places him there with the gun, interacting negatively with the girls.
Precisely. It's an explanation that fits the evidence, the unspent round, but might seem less horrifying than intentional murder, perhaps making it easier for Alan to confess to something.
Does Alan buy into that theory?
He doesn't really engage with the why part, the anger or scaring them. He does acknowledge a round could eject if you rack the slide, but he sticks to his guns, so to speak. He insists he didn't have the gun with him that day on the bridge, so he couldn't have racked it.
Sticking to his original story, what about Ron Logan? Why does his name come up?
It's brief. Holman just asks if Alan knows Ron Logan or if he's ever been on Logan's property. Alan denies both.
Any idea why Holman asked that? Logan owned the property where the girls were found, right?
Yes, exactly. So likely just exploring any potential connections or overlap between Alan and Logan, another figure of interest in the case at various times. Holman also clarifies Alan fishes and mushroom hunts, though notes it was too early for mushrooms in February. Just gathering background, it seems.
As things are winding down in this section, Alan gets more resistant.
Yeah, he starts shutting down, repeatedly says he's done answering questions, tells Holman, "Just arrest me then." He sounds completely worn out and frustrated.
But Holman keeps going.
For a bit. Asks how Alan carries his gun in a holster on his belt. Asks again about carrying it with a round chambered. Alan seems reluctant to answer much more.
What's Holman's final move in this part of the interrogation?
He says he's going to call the prosecutor to update him on their conversation.
Signaling that things are escalating, perhaps?
Could be perceived that way. And then he makes one last appeal, or confrontation. He points again to the science, the evidence item numbers in the reports, item 16, the round found by Liberty's foot, matching item 314, Alan's gun.
And Alan's final response?
Still denial. No way! He just expresses how exhausted he is, how the whole thing has destroyed his life, his name. utterly worn down.
Wow. So that brings us to the end of this particular segment. We've really just walked through a really intense piece of this interrogation.
Absolutely. The focus was squarely on that ballistics evidence, that .40 caliber round, and Holman relentlessly trying to connect Allen to it, trying to get an explanation.
And you heard it unfold the investigator's certainty, the scientific claims, and then Allen's consistent, sometimes emotional denials. Just absolute disbelief.
It really highlights, doesn't it, the power forensic science can have in an investigation,
Hmm.
but also the incredible pressure cooker environment of an interrogation room.
So thinking about this, what really jumps out at you listening back? What questions linger about the evidence, the interaction, the whole investigation based on this exchange?
For me, the biggest thing, the thing to really chew on, is that fundamental clash. You have what's presented as hard scientific in fact, this bullet matches this gun,
Right. Seemingly objective.
and then you have Allen's absolute, unwavering denial. He doesn't just say, I don't remember. He says, it's impossible. No way. How do you square those two things?
Yeah, what could possibly explain that huge gap? Is the science wrong? Is Allen lying? Is there some other explanation entirely we haven't even considered?
Exactly. That discrepancy is right at the heart of it, and it's
Yeah.
something to keep pondering as the larger story continues to unfold.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping straight into a collection of materials you shared with us about an ongoing investigation.
Yeah, it's quite a mix.
It is. We've got parts of a document called Dynamic CCS Plus Investigation, some police scanner audio transcripts from, let's see, February 13th and 14th, 2017.
Right, from the very beginning.
Exactly. And then 2 interview transcripts from much later, 2022. One with someone named Richard on October 13th and another with a Holman on October 26th.
So our goal here is really to, pull out the key details, the potential insights from all these different pieces.
See what they tell us when put together. Okay, where should we start? Maybe the scanner logs, February 13th, 2017.
Sounds good. That gives us the initial timeline.
Okay, so late afternoon, maybe just before 6 p.m. Yeah, 5:57 p.m., dispatch is asking Delphi Fire to head to the station. They need a briefing about 2 missing juveniles.
And you mentioned this call goes out repeatedly.
Yeah, several times, pretty close together.
Yeah.
What does that repetition usually signal?
Well, it suggests urgency, right? They needed fire personnel there fast, maybe thinking search and rescue in difficult terrain, something where fire department skills would be crucial.
Okay. But then later that night, around 9:56 p.m., the message changes.
How so?
It's directing all Delphi Fire personnel back to the station again, but this time the briefing is about a 2320.
Ah, and 2320, that's often code for, well, a deceased person.
Yeah, so quite a shift from missing juveniles just a few hours earlier.
That's a really stark change. It implies that whatever initial search happened, it likely found something very quickly, something that unfortunately changed the whole situation from missing persons to something much worse.
Okay, so let's move into the next day, February 14th. Early hours now. The scanner traffic seems more focused on law enforcement.
Makes sense.
Units en route, that kind of thing. Then around 5:35 a.m., there's a detailed ATL, an attempt to locate for the 2 girls.
And they give names and descriptions.
They do. Liberty Rosalind German, born December 27, 2002. Description is 5'4", 200 pounds, blonde blue eyes. Last seen wearing a fringed tie-dye shirt, gray sweatpants with black writing, black shoes. Location, High Bridge, Delphi, around 1 p.m. the day before.
Okay. And the second girl?
Abigail Joyce Williams, born June 23, 2003. Also 5'4", red hazel eyes. Last seen, gray zip-up sweatshirt over red shirt, jeans. Same time, same place. Carroll County Sheriff is the authority listed.
Wow, that's a lot of specific detail going out over the air very early that morning.
It really is. What does that tell you?
It just underlines how serious they knew this was. They probably had strong reason to fear for the girls' safety and needed everyone looking, needed those exact details out there immediately.
Then later that morning, sort of a strange one, around 12:40 p.m., there's a report about a younger white male, black hoodie, headlamp, banging on windows at a restaurant, about 3 minutes before the call.
A headlamp. In the middle of the day. That is odd.
Yeah. Does it connect? Hard to say from just this, right?
Impossible to say for sure. But it's definitely the kind of, unusual activity nearby that investigators would note down. Could be nothing, could be something. They'd want to check it out.
Okay. Then fast forward to that evening, 6:27 p.m. A message comes through needing rope and someone to bring a body out. Location given.
Oh.
Area of County Road 300 North.
Right. So that confirms the earlier 2320 code, tragically.
Yeah. And the mention of rope.
Suggests a difficult recovery, maybe steep terrain somewhere off the beaten path near County Road 300 North.
So the scanner audio paints a pretty grim picture of those first, 24 hours.
Absolutely. From initial concern to a confirmed tragic discovery.
Okay, let's shift gears now. Jump way forward to October 2022. We have this interview transcript with Richard Allen, October 13th.
Right, 5.5 years later.
First thing, the investigators make it clear. He's not under arrest. He can leave anytime. They say they want to go over what he told Lieutenant Doolin way back when.
Okay, referencing an earlier statement.
Yeah. And they mentioned Doolin's notes.
Yeah.
Said Richard was on the trail between 1:30 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. on February 13th, 2017, parked at the old Farm Bureau building.
And did the note say he saw anything?
Reportedly saw 3 females near Freedom Ridge. One was taller, long dark hair. Also noted his phone info was taken back then. So they're laying the groundwork, reminding him of his previous account.
Standard procedure, establishing the baseline for the conversation. Freedom Ridge, that's another key location on those trails.
They then get his details. Full name Richard Allen, age 50, DOB up September 9/72. Address, phone numbers. Mentions working at CVS since 2013.
All standard identifying information. The job could be relevant for maybe checking work schedules or his routine back in 2017.
Then they asked him to just walk them through that day again, February 13th, 2017.
His version of events.
Right. He says he went to his mom's place first in Peru. Well, Mexico, Indiana, he clarifies. She'd had hip surgery.
Okay.
Left there maybe 11 minutes of 11 Morero, Nuhan. Went to the trails around noon, he figures, because it was, a nice day, warmer than usual.
Makes sense. People wanting to be outdoors.
Describes walking onto the high bridge a little bit, looking down, maybe for fish. Then walked back, sat on a bench that overlooks another trail fork, and then left.
Okay, so on the bridge, but not all the way across, and then sat on a bench.
It seems so. He also talks about parking. Mentions a small bridge you cross before the Big Blue Bridge, which they clarify is Freedom Bridge, and this old building where people sometimes park.
The old Farm Bureau building they mentioned earlier.
I think so, because he says he remembers seeing 2 cars parked at the farmer's entrance when he left, so he knows he didn't park there. So likely the Farm Bureau spot.
Got it. Trying to pinpoint his location?
And who did he see? He recalls seeing 3 girls walking off the trailhead as he was maybe arriving or walking on, an older girl with 2 younger ones.
3 girls, not 2.
3 is what he says here. Didn't really notice anyone else much. Thinks he might have seen someone else on the high bridge when he was walking back, but he's just not sure.
That's quite a bit of detail for years later. The 3 girls detail is interesting, obviously, given 2 were missing. And the uncertainty about seeing someone else on the bridge? Investigators would definitely focus on that.
Yeah, you'd think so. Then the conversation shifts. They ask about his phone. Can they look at the data on his current phone to, maybe confirm his timeline?
Standard request these days. Digital forensics.
And what about the phone he had back in 2017? Does he still have it?
Good question. Technology changes fast.
He says his wife might know if they still have the old one somewhere. But he agrees, yeah, they can look at his current phone. They also touch briefly on his vehicle.
So, looking for any connection phone data, vehicle sightings?
Right. But then the tone seems to change quite a bit.
Oh. How so?
Richard starts saying he feels like they're treating him like a suspect. Says he doesn't want to be a fall guy.
Okay, so he's feeling the pressure.
Investigators say, we're just trying to eliminate people. But then they reveal they've talked to his wife and daughter.
Bringing in family information, that often ramps things up.
And they mention something about a past incident. Richard supposedly putting a gun in his mouth.
Whoa. Okay, that's bringing in some serious personal history. Why?
It's not totally clear why they bring it up right then, but it definitely changes the mood. Then they show him a picture.
A picture from the scene.
From one of the girls' phones, they say.
Yeah.
Shows someone on the bridge. Blue jeans, jacket, hat. They suggest it looks like him.
The famous bridge guy photo.
It seems likely. And they add, his car was seen going out to the trails that day.
Okay, so confronting him directly now. Photo, car sighting. How does he react?
He says, yeah, that's my car. But the photo? He says that's not him. Says he didn't go that far onto the bridge anymore, not even back in 2017.
Denies being the person in the photo.
Right. But the investigators point out the clothes in the photo sound a lot like the clothes he described wearing.
Trying to catch him in a contradiction or an incriminating similarity.
Exactly. And the question gets really direct. Basically, did you harm the girls or did you introduce them to someone who did?
Wow, that's accusatory.
He denies it, says he wasn't involved. And he pushes back, says he's uncomfortable, feels like he's being interrogated now, not just interviewed.
Yeah, I can see why he'd feel that way. That's a major escalation from just revisiting an old statement.
So how does it end? He asks, am I being arrested or can I leave?
Testing the "you're free to leave" statement from the beginning.
Right. He does agree, again, to let them look at his current phone. Says he'll look for the old one. But then the investigators say they want to look at his car and his house for forensics to either confirm or rule him out.
Asking for consent to search. Big step.
And he seems hesitant about them searching his house. The whole thing ends pretty tense. Richard basically says he's lost trust in them.
Not surprising given how the interview went. That trust is clearly broken by the end. They went from reviewing old notes to direct accusations and asking to search his home.
Okay, so that's the Richard Allen interview. Now, there's this other shorter transcript, interview with someone named Holman, October 26th to a 22, so just a couple of weeks later.
Right. What's discussed here?
It starts with something very specific, a bullet, or rather, an unspent round found at the scene.
Okay.
It apparently had 3 extraction marks on it, and Holman says they were told these marks could be matched to the gun, like a specific gun, not just a make or a model.
Ballistics. That could be huge. A unique fingerprint from a firearm.
But then Holman says multiple guns were tested. None of them matched those specific marks.
So they found a round linked to the scene, potentially ejected from the killer's gun, but the marks don't match any gun they've tested.
That seems to be what he's saying. That's a really significant piece of forensic information, or lack thereof, maybe.
Yeah, that raises a ton of questions. Was the gun never recovered? Was it a type they didn't test? Very interesting.
Then Holman talks more generally, says he feels good about witness statements, everything. But he also voices that same concern, Richard being a fall guy.
So Holman also has doubts or concerns about focusing solely on Richard.
Seems so. He even throws out the idea that maybe Richard didn't act alone.
Okay.
And then Holman sketches out a possible scenario. He brings up Richard's wife, mentioning anger and depression issues.
Right, the investigators mentioned talking to the wife in Richard's interview.
Holman suggests maybe Richard encountered the girls.
Yeah.
Told them, go down the hill, which Holman claims experts think the bridge guy voice on the recording is saying.
He's trying to tie Richard to the audio evidence now.
Yeah. And then, Holman theorizes, maybe Richard got angry for some reason.
Yeah.
Pulled out a gun, maybe just to scare them, and racked the slide.
Racking the slide on a
Would
semi-automatic.
eject any round already in the chamber. Holman suggests maybe the unspent round popped out then. Maybe Richard didn't even notice.
So he's proposing a way that specific unspent round with its unique marks could have ended up at the scene, potentially linked to Richard, even if it wasn't fired. An accidental ejection during a confrontation.
Exactly. And then Holman asked Richard directly. Presumably this part refers back to talking with Richard, though the transcript context is a bit unclear if he usually carries his gun with a round in the chamber.
That's a pointed question.
Richard apparently replies he doesn't have to carry it often. And Holman fires back, well, you were carrying it that day.
Whoa. Direct statement, not a question.
No. Then Holman explains the mechanics, how racking a chambered gun ejects a live round. It really feels like Holman is confronting Richard, or at least recounting confronting him, with this specific theory.
Absolutely. He's laying out a narrative. Richard plus anger issues, plus gun, plus possible command from the audio, plus accidental ejection, the unspent round. It tries to connect Richard to that key piece of physical evidence.
So quite a journey through these documents. We start with the raw, immediate chaos and tragedy in the scanner logs.
Yeah, that real-time unfolding of events, the
Yeah.
shift from missing to recovery.
Then we jump years ahead to this really intense interview with Richard Allen. His detailed account, but met with clear suspicion from investigators.
Focusing on the photo, the car, the clothes, his demeanor, bringing in family info.
Right, and his feeling of being targeted.
Ugh.
Then the Holman interview adds this critical forensic detail, the unspent round with unmatched marks, and offers a theory, a potential narrative, trying to explain how Richard might fit in, even linking him to the audio and that specific bullet.
It really shows the different layers. You have the initial facts on the ground, the later recollections and denials, the physical evidence or lack thereof, and the theories investigators build to try and make sense of it all.
What really jumps out at you from all this? For me, it's partly that speed, like we said, on the scanner traffic, missing persons to recovery in just hours. Chilling.
Definitely. And the contrast between Richard's fairly detailed recall and the investigators' intense skepticism in that 2022 interview is stark.
Yeah, and their focus on the clothing match between the photo and his description, it feels like a linchpin for them, maybe because other evidence is lacking.
Could be. Circumstantial evidence often takes center stage when direct proof is elusive. And that bullet, that's a huge piece, isn't it? An actual object from the scene, potentially from the weapon, but it doesn't match anything tested. That's a major complication.
It really is. And Holman's theory, trying to explain it via an accidental ejection, it's plausible mechanically, but still speculative about Richard's actions and intent.
It highlights the challenge. They have a suspect they're clearly focused on, some circumstantial links, but also this key piece of physical evidence that doesn't quite fit the guns they've apparently tested. It forces you to weigh things differently.
Absolutely. You're weighing Richard's presence and statements against the investigator's suspicions, the photo, the car, and this physical clue, the bullet. That seems to point somewhere, but maybe not definitively where they expected.
It makes you think about the burden of proof, circumstantial versus direct evidence. How do you build a solid case from these kinds of pieces?
Yeah. And based just on these materials, it feels like there are still significant gaps, major questions unanswered. It really underscores the complexity of putting this puzzle together years after the fact. What other pieces are out there that we're not seeing in just these documents? That's the lingering question.
Welcome, everyone. We're doing a deep dive today into some pretty intense material.
Yeah, definitely intense. We're looking at transcript excerpts from Bob Siegel.
That's right. Phone calls involving Richard Allen, first with Kathy, and then another call with his mother, Yanis Allen.
And these are really raw conversations. You're getting these like unfiltered moments of really high emotion, not prepared statements.
Exactly. So our goal here for everyone listening is to sort of carefully walk through these exchanges. We want to see what themes pop up, get a sense of the emotional reactions happening.
And just try to understand what's being communicated in these very personal calls.
Absolutely. And it's crucial to remember this is all centered around Richard's statements about the deaths of Abby and Libby. So yeah, it's sensitive content we're navigating.
And just to be clear, we're not here to decide guilt or innocence based on these.
No, not at all.
We're really focused on the human dynamic, the reactions you hear in these calls.
Okay, so let's get into it. The first conversation, Richard and Kathy. It starts off, well, pretty explosively.
Yeah, almost right away. He tells her, I did it. I killed Abby and Libby.
Just, wow. And Kathy's first words back?
Immediate denial. No, you didn't. Straight away.
That feels like almost a reflex, doesn't it? Like a protective instinct kicking in.
Could be, yeah. Facing something that shocking.
Denial is a common first reaction.
But Richard doesn't let it go. He says, I did?
And then again, yes, I did. He really emphasizes it.
That repetition, it feels significant, right? Like he needs to say it or needs her to hear it.
It does feel driven, and like maybe there's this internal pressure, to get it out.
Kathy then asks, no, you didn't. Why would you say that? You can sort of hear the confusion there, the struggle to grasp it.
Yeah, just trying to make sense of it, reconcile it with, who she thinks he is.
And his answer is, well, it's interesting. What if I did? I think I did.
A little less certain there, maybe. Right, shifts slightly, and then he follows with, because I think I did. It's like he's processing it himself, maybe, but still landing on that conclusion.
It's a strange sort of reasoning. And then Kathy pivots, doesn't she? Her focus shifts.
Yeah, straight to his well-being. She says, you are not well, so you don't need to say you did something you didn't do.
Right, so she's immediately framing it as potentially a symptom of him being unwell.
Almost dismissing the content, in a way, by attributing it to his mental state. What does that tell you?
Well, it suggests her immediate concern might be him, his condition, rather than the literal meaning of his words. Maybe protecting herself, too, perhaps?
Could be. But Richard, he persists. He says, I have to let you know I did it.
That feels like a key moment. Despite her trying to rationalize or comfort, he's still pushing this specific message.
Yeah. And this is where the emotion really ramps up for Kathy. The transcript mentions her getting upset, crying.
And she says something like, I don't understand. I just got to know everybody is still going to love me.
That line, it's really striking, isn't it? Her immediate thought goes to the social fallout, how people will see her.
It is. It shows this deep fear about the consequences, maybe even before she's fully accepted. The confession itself could be true. It's quite revealing.
Heartbreaking, really. And then Richard says something that shows he's thinking about consequences, too. I may have to spend the rest of my life here.
Yeah, there's a sense of finality, or maybe resignation in that. He sees a potential future.
And right after that, he asks for her support. I just hope you can still love me.
And then mentions the electric chair.
Right. If I get the electric chair. And then, will you be there for me? It's incredibly vulnerable.
It really is. He's facing this potentially horrific future, and his immediate concern is her love, her presence. What does that vulnerability tell us?
It shows how much he relies on her, maybe, and maybe how much he understands the weight of what he just said.
Definitely. And Kathy's response to all this,
Yeah.
it's all over the place. The transcript says she's crying, says no.
Presumably to the electric chair part or the whole situation.
Yeah. But then she says, "It's true, honey."
Wait, she says it's true after denying it.
According to this transcript excerpt, yes. But then immediately contradicts it with, "No, it's not."
Wow, back and forth.
Exactly. And then again, "It's true, honey," followed by a final "no."
That really paints a picture of just intense internal conflict, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Grappling with disbelief, maybe a flicker of awful acceptance, then pushing it away again. That final "no" feels like trying to shut the door on it.
Okay, let's shift gears now to the other conversation. Richard talking to his mother, Janice Allen.
Right. And the tone feels different here from the start.
Yeah, Janice opens warmly. It's good to hear your voice. Very maternal.
Very. But Richard, again, cuts right to it. "So did Kathy tell you I did it?"
He's direct. Wants to know if the news has traveled. Why the urgency, you think?
Maybe wants to control the narrative? Or just face it head on with her? Hard to say for sure.
And Janice's reaction is, well, avoidance.
Seems like it. She says, "We're not going to discuss this, okay? We love you. You know that, don't you?"
So she tries to shut down that line of discussion immediately and pivot to reassurance, love and support.
Exactly. Protect him. Maybe protect herself from the topic itself. Focus on the connection.
Richard pushes slightly, though, asks, regardless.
Such a vulnerable question.
Yeah. And Janice confirms, yeah, unconditional love being offered there.
Which seems to be what Richard is deeply worried about losing.
He says it outright. I'm just worried you guys aren't going to love me because I said I did it.
There it is again. The fear that the confession itself, true or not, will cost him his family's love.
And Janice reassures him again, we'll always love you no matter what. Classic maternal comfort.
But right after that, the transcript notes something important. His mom says he's not in a good place.
So she's offering unconditional love, but she also has this assessment of his mental state.
Exactly. Which might explain why she's hesitant to engage with the confession directly, right? If she thinks he's not well.
Then maybe she doesn't believe what he's saying is necessarily factual. She might attribute it to his condition.
Precisely. And Richard, well, he repeats it again. Just, "I did it."
Even after she tried to change the subject?
Yeah. And Janice tries another deflection tactic.
Yeah.
"Rick, don't talk like this, I think they're just messing with you."
Offering an external explanation now, suggesting someone else is influencing him.
It's another way to, perhaps, avoid the core claim, isn't it? Find a different reason for why he'd say such a thing.
Seems like it. Then there's a pause, and Richard says, I love you.
A very poignant moment after all that back and forth. Maybe seeking connection again after her dismissal.
Maybe. And Janice responds with her own belief, I just know you don't have it in you to do something like this.
That's a statement about her fundamental view of his character.
Rooted in her knowledge of him as her son. But Richard challenges that directly.
How so?
With a question. Mom, why would I tell you I did it if I didn't?
Oof. That cuts right through the denial, doesn't it?
It really does. It puts the burden back on her. If it's not true, why is he saying it? What is the motivation then?
And that's the million-dollar question, really. If it wasn't true, why confess?
What are the possibilities there?
Well, you have the obvious one, because it is true, and he needs to confess.
Okay.
Or it could be linked to severe mental distress, like you mentioned, delusions, a distorted sense of reality where he genuinely believes he did it, even if he didn't.
Right. That's possible.
It could also be, theoretically, a desperate cry for help, saying something extreme to get attention or intervention. Or in some, really complex situations, people might falsely confess to protect someone else, though that seems less likely here, maybe. Or even some kind of manipulation. It's complicated.
Definitely complicated. So looking at both calls, Kathy's and Janice's, what themes really jump out at you?
Well, the contrast in their initial reactions is stark, isn't it?
Yeah, very different.
Kathy's immediate denial, then that roller coaster of emotion, fear, confusion, concern for social standing. It's very raw and personal.
Right. Whereas Janice seems more protective, almost instantly trying to manage the situation, frame it as him being unwell.
Yeah, more focused on his state of mind, offering external explanations like they're messing with you, a different kind of coping mechanism maybe.
And then you have Richard himself, His persistence is a huge theme.
Absolutely. Saying it to both women, repeating it despite their reactions. That insistence is central. You have to ask what's driving that.
Is it guilt? Is it delusion? Is it something else? We can't know from just this, but the persistence is undeniable.
Undeniable. And the sheer emotional weight in these calls, it's palpable. You're hearing fear, disbelief, desperation for love, potential resignation. It's incredibly heavy.
It really is. And Giannis's focus on his mental state not in a good place, that really highlights how we try to make sense of the unthinkable, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a way to potentially process something horrific. If you can attribute it to illness or external manipulation, maybe it feels less real, or at least explainable within a framework that preserves your image of the person.
Creates a narrative you can perhaps live with more easily than the alternative.
Exactly. It's a defense mechanism, possibly for both of them.
So wrapping up this deep dive, we've looked closely at Richard's confessions in these calls to Kathy and Janice.
And we've seen their very different, very human responses. Kathy's emotional chaos, Janice's attempt at protective rationalization.
It really underscores how raw and personal these transcripts are. A difficult window into an incredibly charged situation.
Yeah, filled with just immense emotional complexity.
So for everyone listening, maybe the takeaway is to think about that human element. What could be driving these different statements, these varied reactions in circumstances that are just so incredibly difficult?
Right. It makes you reflect on truth and belief and how relationships endure or strain when faced with claims like these. How do we process information that shatters our view of someone close to us?
A lot to think about there. Definitely complex. Welcome, everyone. We're doing a deep dive today into some pretty intense material.
Yeah, definitely intense. We're looking at transcript excerpts from Bob Siegel.
That's right. Phone calls involving Richard Allen, first with Kathy, and then another call with his mother, Janice Allen.
And these are really raw conversations. You're getting these like unfiltered moments of really high emotion, not prepared statements.
Exactly. So our goal here for everyone listening is to sort of carefully walk through these exchanges. We want to see what themes pop up, get a sense of the emotional reactions happening.
And just try to understand what's being communicated in these very personal calls.
Absolutely. And it's crucial to remember this is all centered around Richard's statements about the deaths of Abby and Libby. So yeah, it's sensitive content we're navigating.
And just to be clear, we're not here to decide guilt or innocence based on these.
No, not at all.
We're really focused on the human dynamic, the reactions you hear in these calls.
Okay, so let's get into it. The first conversation, Richard and Kathy. It starts off, well, pretty explosively.
Yeah, almost right away. He tells her, I did it. I killed Abby and Libby.
Just, wow. And Kathy's first words back?
Immediate denial. No, you didn't. Straight away.
That feels like almost a reflex, doesn't it? Like a protective instinct kicking in.
Could be, yeah. Facing something that shocking.
Denial is a common first reaction.
But Richard doesn't let it go. He says, I did?
And then again, yes, I did. He really emphasizes it.
That repetition, it feels significant, right? Like he needs to say it or needs her to hear it.
It does feel driven, like maybe there's this internal pressure, to get it out.
Kathy then asks, no, you didn't. Why would you say that? You can sort of hear the confusion there, the struggle to grasp it.
Yeah, just trying to make sense of it, reconcile it with, who she thinks he is.
And his answer is, well, it's interesting. What if I did? I think I did.
A little less certain there, maybe. Right, shifts slightly, and then he follows with, because I think I did. It's like he's processing it himself, maybe, but still landing on that conclusion.
It's a strange sort of reasoning. And then Kathy pivots, doesn't she? Her focus shifts.
Yeah, straight to his well-being. She says, you are not well, so you don't need to say you did something you didn't do.
Right, so she's immediately framing it as potentially a symptom of him being unwell.
Almost dismissing the content, in a way, by attributing it to his mental state. What does that tell you?
Well, it suggests her immediate concern might be him, his condition, rather than the literal meaning of his words. Maybe protecting herself, too, perhaps?
Could be. But Richard, he persists. He says, I have to let you know I did it.
That feels like a key moment. Despite her trying to rationalize or comfort, he's still pushing this specific message.
Yeah. And this is where the emotion really ramps up for Kathy. The transcript mentions her getting upset, crying.
And she says something like, I don't understand. I just got to know everybody is still going to love me.
That line, it's really striking, isn't it? Her immediate thought goes to the social fallout, how people will see her.
It is. It shows this deep fear about the consequences, maybe even before she's fully accepted. The confession itself could be true. It's quite revealing.
Heartbreaking, really. And then Richard said something that shows he's thinking about consequences, too. I may have to spend the rest of my life here.
Yeah, there's a sense of finality, or maybe resignation in that. He sees a potential future.
And right after that, he asks for her support. I just hope you can still love me.
And then mentions the electric chair.
Right. If I get the electric chair. And then, will you be there for me? It's incredibly vulnerable.
It really is. He's facing this potentially horrific future, and his immediate concern is her love, her presence. What does that vulnerability tell us?
It shows how much he relies on her, maybe, and maybe how much he understands the weight of what he just said.
Definitely. And Kathy's response to all this,
Yeah.
it's all over the place. The transcript says she's crying, says no.
Presumably to the electric chair part or the whole situation.
Yeah. But then she says, "It's true, honey."
Wait, she says it's true after denying it.
According to this transcript excerpt, yes. But then immediately contradicts it with, "No, it's not."
Wow, back and forth.
Exactly. And then again, "It's true, honey," followed by a final "no."
That really paints a picture of just intense internal conflict, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Grappling with disbelief, maybe a flicker of awful acceptance, then pushing it away again. That final "no" feels like trying to shut the door on it.
Okay, let's shift gears now to the other conversation. Richard talking to his mother, Janice Allen.
Right. And the tone feels different here from the start.
Yeah, Janice opens warmly. It's good to hear your voice. Very maternal.
Very. But Richard, again, cuts right to it. "So did Kathy tell you I did it?"
He's direct. Wants to know if the news has traveled. Why the urgency, you think?
Maybe wants to control the narrative? Or just face it head on with her? Hard to say for sure.
And Janice's reaction is, well, avoidance.
Seems like it. She says, "We're not going to discuss this, okay? We love you. You know that, don't you?"
So she tries to shut down that line of discussion immediately and pivot to reassurance, love and support.
Exactly. Protect him. Maybe protect herself from the topic itself. Focus on the connection.
Richard pushes slightly, though, asks, regardless.
Such a vulnerable question.
Yeah. And Janice confirms, yeah, unconditional love being offered there.
Which seems to be what Richard is deeply worried about losing.
He says it outright. I'm just worried you guys aren't going to love me because I said I did it.
There it is again. The fear that the confession itself, true or not, will cost him his family's love.
And Janice reassures him again, we'll always love you no matter what. Classic maternal comfort.
But right after that, the transcript notes something important. His mom says he's not in a good place.
So she's offering unconditional love, but she also has this assessment of his mental state.
Exactly. Which might explain why she's hesitant to engage with the confession directly, right? If she thinks he's not well.
Then maybe she doesn't believe what he's saying is necessarily factual. She might attribute it to his condition.
Precisely. And Richard, well, he repeats it again. Just, "I did it."
Even after she tried to change the subject?
Yeah. And Janice tries another deflection tactic.
Yeah.
"Rick, don't talk like this, I think they're just messing with you."
Offering an external explanation now, suggesting someone else is influencing him.
It's another way to, perhaps, avoid the core claim, isn't it? Find a different reason for why he'd say such a thing.
Seems like it. Then there's a pause, and Richard says, I love you.
A very poignant moment after all that back and forth. Maybe seeking connection again after her dismissal.
Maybe. And Janice responds with her own belief, I just know you don't have it in you to do something like this.
That's a statement about her fundamental view of his character.
Rooted in her knowledge of him as her son. But Richard challenges that directly.
How so?
With a question. Mom, why would I tell you I did it if I didn't?
Oof. That cuts right through the denial, doesn't it?
It really does. It puts the burden back on her. If it's not true, why is he saying it? What is the motivation then?
And that's the million-dollar question, really. If it wasn't true, why confess?
What are the possibilities there?
Well, you have the obvious one, because it is true, and he needs to confess.
Okay.
Or it could be linked to severe mental distress, like you mentioned, delusions, a distorted sense of reality where he genuinely believes he did it, even if he didn't.
Right. That's possible.
It could also be, theoretically, a desperate cry for help, saying something extreme to get attention or intervention. Or in some, really complex situations, people might falsely confess to protect someone else, though that seems less likely here, maybe.
Oh,
or
maybe.
Even some kind of manipulation. It's complicated.
Definitely complicated. So looking at both calls, Kathy's and Janice's, what themes really jump out at you?
Well, the contrast in their initial reactions is stark, isn't it?
Yeah, very different.
Kathy's immediate denial, then that roller coaster of emotion fear, confusion, concern for social standing.
Mhm.
It's very raw and personal.
Right. Whereas Giannis seems more protective, almost instantly trying to manage the situation, frame it as him being unwell.
Yeah, more focused on his state of mind, offering external explanations like they're messing with you, a different kind of coping mechanism maybe.
And then you have Richard himself. His persistence is a huge theme.
Absolutely. Saying it to both women, repeating it despite their reactions. That insistence is central. You have to ask what's driving that.
Is it guilt? Is it delusion? Is it something else? We can't know from just this, but the persistence is undeniable.
Undeniable. And the sheer emotional weight in these calls, it's palpable. You're hearing fear, disbelief, desperation for love, potential resignation. It's incredibly heavy.
It really is. And Giannis's focus on his mental state not in a good place, that really highlights how we try to make sense of the unthinkable, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a way to potentially process something horrific. If you can attribute it to illness or external manipulation, maybe it feels less real, or at least explainable within a framework that preserves your image of the person.
Creates a narrative you can perhaps live with more easily than the alternative.
Exactly. It's a defense mechanism, possibly for both of them.
So wrapping up this deep dive, we've looked closely at Richard's confessions in these calls to Kathy and Janice.
And we've seen their very different, very human responses. Kathy's emotional chaos, Janice's attempt at protective rationalization.
It really underscores how raw and personal these transcripts are. A difficult window into an incredibly charged situation.
Yeah, filled with just immense emotional complexity.
So for everyone listening, maybe the takeaway is to think about that human element. What could be driving these different statements, these varied reactions in circumstances that are just so incredibly difficult?
Right. It makes you reflect on truth and belief and how relationships endure or strain when faced with claims like these. How do we process information that shatters our view of someone close to us?
A lot to think about there. Definitely complex.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We know you're here to get straight to the facts, and today we're really doing that. We're diving into police scanner audio transcripts.
Yes, specifically from February 13th through the 15th, back in 2017.
These are communications from Carroll County Fire and the Indiana State Police, the ISP.
Exactly. It's pretty raw stuff. You get a real sense of the initial moments, how an emergency response starts to unfold.
And our mission today is really to pull out those key events, the first actions, as things started happening. It's a rare look at mobilization in almost real time.
A very immediate perspective.
So let's start with February 13th. Looking at the Carroll County Fire dispatches, you immediately see something's up. At 5:57 p.m. Eastern, there are calls for Delphi Fire personnel. They need to go to the station for a briefing.
And it mentions 2 missing juveniles.
Yes, explicitly. And they repeat the request. Again, at about 6:20 p.m. Same thing, Delphi Fire. Head to the station, briefing on missing juveniles.
That repetition and the call for an in-person briefing, that feels significant, doesn't it? So early on.
It does. Why not just relay info over the radio initially? What makes them say, everybody needs to come in?
Well, it could suggest a few things. Maybe the information was sensitive or perhaps complex, needing detailed explanation. Or maybe the level of concern was just immediately higher than a typical missing persons call.
Right, like they already knew something that warranted getting everyone physically present.
Potentially. It definitely flags it as something beyond routine from the get-go.
And it wasn't just Delphi. About an hour later, maybe 6:57 p.m., there's a call for Camden Fire.
Ah, yes, the detail request.
Exactly. Requesting men at their station for a detail immediately. Detail seems a bit vague.
It is, but in emergency services, detail usually means assembling personnel for a specific task or assignment. Often short-term, often needing a quick response.
So not just a general alert, but potentially gearing up for some kind of operation.
That's a reasonable interpretation. It adds to that feeling of mobilization. You've got Delphi being briefed, Camden being assembled for a task.
Multiple stations involved early.
Mm-hmm.
Then later that night, maybe around 9:56 p.m., another call specifically for Delphi Fire again.
Okay.
This time it mentions 5:51, and again, come to the station for a briefing about it.
5:51. Obviously, without their specific code list, we're guessing a bit.
Sure.
But codes like that often signify a type of incident, maybe an alert level, or sometimes a specific location type. It could be anything from, say, an escalated welfare check to a potential search scenario.
But the fact that there is a code, plus another urgent call for briefing.
It just reinforces that sense of growing urgency and the need to coordinate to get everyone the same information. Whatever 551 meant, it was important enough for another station call-in.
Okay, let's shift gears. February 14th. Now we're looking at the Indiana State Police, the ISP transcripts. Starts after midnight.
Right. And initially it looks like pretty standard overnight traffic, routine checks, that sort of thing.
But then, around 6:08 a.m., there's a request for a status check. And what follows is, well, it's pretty specific.
Very specific. They relay detailed information on two individuals.
Ryan N. Crawford, born July 19th, 1994, and Ryan Powell, born April 3rd, 1988.
And it's not just names and dates of birth. They include record check results.
Yeah, that's what stood out. For Crawford, they mentioned he's a registered sex offender, though noted as unrelated trespass and has a valid license.
And for Powell, they use Signal 80, clarifying it potentially means violent, and also notes of valid license.
Broadcasting that kind of detail, especially the Signal 80 violent potential and the sex offender status, that feels like a significant step, doesn't it? At 6 a.m.
It absolutely does. You don't typically air that level of detail widely unless those individuals are persons of interest for a very specific active reason.
So what does that suggest? Do they have a tip? A witness, maybe?
It's hard to say definitively from just the transcript, of course, but it strongly suggests that something brought these two names to the attention of law enforcement very early on in connection, presumably with the missing girls.
It really makes you wonder what information they were working with at that point.
Exactly. It points to an early investigative angle, a specific focus, even if we don't know the why behind it yet.
Then later that day, February 14th, around 3:42 p.m., there's a different kind of dispatch, much shorter. It mentions a Jeep Wrangler and a report about someone being awake using a drone near a place called Railroad Robinson.
Right. Seems a bit random almost.
Yeah, it's not explicitly linked to the girls in the transcript.
Yeah.
So why log something like that? Is it just standard procedure to note anything unusual?
Pretty much, especially when you have missing juveniles. Law enforcement will cast a really wide net initially. Any unusual activity reported in potentially relevant areas gets noted down.
So someone with a drone near Railroad Robinson. Maybe the location was near the search area, or maybe just the drone itself seemed odd.
Could be either or both. It's an anomaly. In these situations, you log the anomalies because sometimes they turn out to be relevant later, even if they don't seem connected at first. It's another small piece of the early information puzzle.
Okay, now we get to February 15th. And this is a big shift in the communications, isn't it?
It really is. Early hours, around 5:35 a.m., the ISP dispatcher makes the formal announcement.
Attempting to locate two missing juvenile girls. And this is where we first hear their names in these transcripts.
Liberty Rose Lynn German and Abigail Joyce Williams.
Hearing the names makes it very real, very specific. The focus sharpens dramatically here.
Absolutely. It moves from, generalized concern and background checks to a clear public call to find these specific girls.
And the dispatch includes detailed descriptions. For Abby&Libby, DOB, December 27, 2002. 5'4", about 200 pounds, blonde hair, blue eyes.
And the clothing, that's crucial.
Right. Fringed tie-dye shirt, gray sweatpants with black writing, black shoes. And the key piece, last seen at the High Bridge in Delphi.
Around 1:00 p.m. on February 13th. Pinpointing the time and location is vital.
Gives people a concrete image and time frame to work with.
Exactly. This is the information needed for potential witnesses, for the public to help. It turns an abstract search into something tangible.
And for Abigail, Abby, DOB, June 23, 2003. Also 5'4", red or hazel eyes.
Clothing. Gray zip-up sweatshirt, red shirt underneath, jeans.
Again, specific details. The dispatch also notes the authority is the Sheriff of Carroll County, Lafayette, and gives a reference number, 0138.
That's important for procedure. It establishes who's in charge, the Carroll County Sheriff, and gives the case a unique ID.
The reference number helps coordinate everything, right, between agencies.
Precisely. It ensures all incoming tips, reports, actions are logged under the same case file, essential for managing a complex investigation.
There's one more dispatch from the 15th mentioned, quite early, around 12:40 a.m.
Okay.
It references a caller reporting a younger white male, black hoodie, headlamp, banging on windows.
Again, not immediately linked to the girls in the transcript itself.
No. But given the timing and the ongoing situation, how would police typically view a report like that?
Well, in the midst of searching for missing kids, any report of strange behavior in the area gets looked at. High vigilance is key.
So, even if it seems unrelated.
They'd likely check it out, try to identify the person, figure out what was going on. You can't afford to dismiss anything in those first critical hours. It might be nothing, but you have to rule it out.
So, pulling it all together then,
Yeah,
these transcripts show quite a progression.
definitely.
Feb 13th, urgent fire briefings about missing juveniles.
Yeah.
Sort of coded alerts.
Yeah, mobilization starts.
Feb 14th, ISP shares really specific, potentially sensitive info about 2 named men early in the morning. Odd drone report later.
Shows they're developing specific leads or theories while still logging anomalies.
Then Feb 15th, the official public attempt to locate Liberty German, Abigail Williams, full descriptions, last known locations, the High Bridge on the 13th.
It's a powerful sequence. You hear the response building from initial internal alerts to specific investigative actions, and finally to a formal public announcement. It's a raw look at the first 36-48 hours.
It really gives you a sense of that initial scramble, the flow of fragmented information, the urgency.
You almost feel it building through the calls.
Which brings us to a final thought, maybe something for our listeners to consider.
Okay.
Think about how these initial communications, these fragmented calls and codes and descriptions, how they formed the absolute bedrock for everything that came next.
Right, the massive search, the long investigation, it all started here.
So consider the incredible challenge of coordinating all of that, starting from these first few calls. What does it really tell us about how critical those first hours are and the complex machine that kicks into gear immediately when children go missing?